Okay. Do I have a motion to return to open session?
So moved. Second.
I believe that was Ms. Franklin and Mr. Roberts. Any discussion? Ms. Reed, will you please call the roll?
Ms. Bond,
Yes.
Ms. Franklin,
Yes.
Dr. Guitry,
Yes.
Ms. Pardon,
Yes.
Mr. Roberts,
Yes.
Dr. Roundtree,
Yes.
Purcell.
Yes.
7 in favor.
Motion carries. Do I have a motion to certify closed session that, to the best of each member's knowledge, only public business matters lawfully exempted from open meeting requirements by Virginia law were discussed in the closed meeting to which this certification applies, and only such public business matters as were identified in the motion convening the closed meeting were heard, discussed, or considered?
So moved.
Second.
Mr. Roberts and Ms. Franklin, any discussion? Ms. Reed, will you please call the roll?
Ms. Bond,
Yes.
Ms. Franklin,
Yes.
Dr. Guitry,
Yes.
Ms. Pardon,
Yes.
Mr. Roberts,
Yes.
Dr. Roundtree,
Yes.
Ms. Purcell.
Yes.
7 in favor.
Motion carries. Do I have a motion to postpone to a later meeting our compliance HR professional development?
So moved. Second.
Ms. Franklin and Dr. Roundtree? Any discussion? Our closed session went a little longer than we anticipated, so we were unable to get to this part of the agenda. Ms. Reed, will you please call the roll?
Ms. Bond,
Yes.
Ms. Franklin,
Yes.
Dr. Guitry,
Yes.
Pardon,
Yes.
Mr. Roberts,
Yes.
Dr. Roundtree,
Yes.
Ms. Purcell.
Yes.
7 in favor.
Motion carries. Do I have a motion to return student A to school? Second. I believe that was Ms. Franklin and Ms. Bond. Any discussion? Ms. Reed, will you please call the roll?
Ms. Bond,
Yes.
Ms. Franklin,
Yes.
Dr. Guitry,
Yes.
Ms. Pardon, Mr. Roberts,
Yes.
Dr. Roundtree,
Yes.
Ms. Purcell.
Yes.
7 in favor.
Motion carries. Do I have a motion to exempt application 1 from compulsory attendance due to religious exemption in Montgomery County Public Schools?
So moved.
Second. Mr. Roberts and Ms. Parton, any discussion? Ms. Reed, will you please call the roll?
Ms. Bond,
Yes.
Ms. Franklin,
No.
Dr. Guitry,
Yes.
Ms. Pardon, Mr. Roberts,
Yes.
Dr. Roundtree,
No.
Ms. Purcell.
Yes.
6 in favor, 5 in favor, 2 opposed.
Motion carries. Do I have a motion to approve the personnel report as presented?
So moved.
Second.
Dr. Roundtree and Mr. Roberts, any discussion? Ms. Reed, will you please call the roll?
Ms. Pardon,
Yes.
Ms. Bond,
Yes.
Ms. Franklin,
No.
Dr. Guitry,
Yes.
Mr. Roberts,
Yes.
Dr. Roundtree,
Yes.
Ms. Purcell.
Yes.
6 in favor, 1 opposed.
Motion carries. All right. Thank you, everyone, for being here tonight and for letting us get through our closed session items. Now we will move on to our mission and belief statement, and our student representative tonight is Olivia McNulty from Blacksburg High School. Olivia, will you please read our mission and belief statements?
MCPS is an innovative educational community. We value diversity, and we are committed to equity and inclusion. MCPS empowers learners to realize success in an ever-changing global society through collaboration with communities, families, staff, and students. MCPS provides a safe, engaging learning environment and intentional exposure to positive social, emotional, and academic experiences. Our beliefs are all students can learn in order to pursue their dreams. Schools are a safe place of joy, wonder, and creativity. Every person deserves to be loved, valued, and respected. Kindness is an essential skill of a responsible, productive community member. The diversity of our community is one of our greatest strengths. All people deserve equitable access to opportunities and resources. Every child deserves an advocate. Honoring the voices of students and other stakeholders strengthens the school community. Open communication and feedback are vital to our growth. Learning and teaching are collective efforts that begin at birth and involve the entire community. Relationship building and high expectations are foundational to student success. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Olivia. Our next agenda item is public address. We welcome the opportunity to hear from students, parents, employees, and community members about education matters in this community. As a reminder, the board sets aside 30 minutes to start our public address. We have the option to extend in 30-minute increments, which Ms. Reed will remind us of. If there are additional speakers after 90 minutes, the board will continue with their business meeting and hold one additional 30-minute session at the end of the business meeting. The clock continues through applause and disruptions. The more disruptions there are, the fewer speakers who get to address the board. I will call each speaker up by name in the order that they signed up. Each speaker has 3 minutes to address the board. The board does not respond to speakers during public address. The screens will show when the speaker has 30 seconds remaining and when time is up. Please state your name and the area of the county in which you live. Our first speaker is Sabrina Bibb, followed by Rachel Colby. Is Ms. Bibb present tonight? Ms. Colby? Come on up.
Good evening. My name is Rachel Colby, and I serve as the band director for Shawsville Middle School and Eastern Montgomery High School. The collective bargaining agreement has benefited not only me, but my students as well. As a new teacher to MCPS 3 years ago, I was doing my best to become accustomed to all that was expected of me for both of my schools. As you can imagine, working between schools can be tricky, and navigating 2 new schools and 5 new groups of students was incredibly overwhelming. While my administrations are always there for our students, it is understandable that a teacher who is in either building for only part of the day can slip through the cracks. During my first year, I was scheduled for morning bus duty at SMS and cafeteria and library lunch duty at Eastern Montgomery for 5 to 6 weeks out of a quarter. In order to get everything done that I needed to, I was getting to the school building between 6:30 and 6:45 every morning. This extra hour in the morning was draining, especially when I wasn't getting home until 10:30 or 11 p.m. during marching band season. Thanks to our collective bargaining agreement, I was able to speak with my MCEA building rep and learned that the duties that I was covering were way more than what is allowed by the CBA. My rep and I spoke to Katie Seidemann, who went to my administration on my behalf to discuss a solution. They were able to come together to remove duties for me in the morning and lessen some of the required duties at lunch at the high school. Now that I don't have morning duties, I am comfortably able to arrive at 7:15 every morning to prepare for my busy day. However, the best outcome by far is for my band students. Many of my students lack the opportunity to practice at home due to many different home life situations. I am now able to open my band room in the morning to those students to give them a place to practice, receive individual lessons from me, or even try a new instrument. We have had a huge growth of interest in band now that other students can hear and see what we do in the secrets of the band room. With collective bargaining, I am able to offer more and be there for my students as their director. Please know that even the small things in the CBA, like duty regulation, have a huge impact and effect, even at our smaller schools. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Ms. Colby. Our next speaker is Marjorie Mullins, and that's followed by Chris Thomas.
Hi, I'm Marjorie Mullins. I live in Blacksburg. I teach at Gilbert Lincoln Elementary. Both of my personal children have gone through Montgomery County Public Schools. They are adults now. And I'm here to speak on behalf of collective bargaining. As an elementary school teacher, and I started in Louisiana where there were no computers. We didn't have email back in those days. We didn't, everything was by hand. And someone said to me recently, well, isn't that the teacher life, you know, bringing papers home to grade and making lesson plans? And it is. And it is part of the things that we do and love to do as a teacher. But things have really progressed now. We have data, we have assessments, we have email, we have all the electronic things, all the different supplements that we can use. And that takes a lot of time to plan and research, and there's really no general ed teacher anymore. It's, you know, we all specialize, you know, and we've got younger teachers, we've got older teachers, and we all appreciate so much our protected planning time. Also, our 30-minute lunch time that the collective bargaining has provided for us. As an older teacher, it does make for a full busy day if you have meetings during your planning and your grading and you're trying to, you know, get your papers copied and things for the day. So we greatly appreciate, and I know the younger teachers, people in the middle of their career, you know, it can wear you down and it can be tiring. And I hope that our collective bargaining can continue because, you know, I hate to lose some of the younger teachers middle of the career and probably those of us that are, you know, looking toward retirement sometime soon. And I just thank you very much for listening. It's part of being a teacher, doing the schoolwork and the prep, and it's part of what we love to do. But we really appreciate the time that we're allowed and given, and that professional respect that we feel by being able to be at the table, you know, for discussing our contracts. So thank you very much.
Thank you, Ms. Mullins. Our next speaker is Chris Thomas, followed by Alicia Vaught.
Chris Thomas, Christiansburg. Members of the board, it's my understanding that MCPS has blocked Teachers Pay Teachers from use by employees on both the school network and MCPS-administered devices for security reasons. As a cybersecurity professional myself, I share the reflex caution and default paranoia that defines my entire industry. The internet is out to get us, and only through constant vigilance do we keep our network from turning into a Russian bot farm or a Bitcoin mining swarm. But security hath consequences. The fact is that hundreds of MCPS employees use Teachers Pay Teachers. They depend on it for last-minute worksheets, activities, and other curricular materials. We can say that they're responsible for curricular development, but sometimes even the best-laid plans of mice and men go awry. I've spent the last several days poking around Teachers Pay Teachers from a cybersecurity standpoint, and in my professional assessment, it's a mixed bag. They're SOC 1, SOC 2, and ISO 27001 certified. They undergo regular vulnerability and pen testing. They scan their files and upload and periodically rescan their library, and those are all good things. Honestly, TPT has a better security posture than many other platforms in common use in our school system today. The risk, as I understand it, is in the distribution of user-submitted files. TPT trades in a lot of different file types like PDFs, Office formats, and even some zip files. And I'm sure you've all used those in your day-to-day lives, but from an IT professional standpoint, they're all the stuff of nightmares. Users trust PDFs implicitly. Office documents can contain malicious macros, and you can put literally anything into a zip file, and even weaponize the compression system itself into something that's euphemistically called a zip bomb, and it's just way too nerdy for me to explain here, but Dr. Roundtree, hit me up later, I'll get you. I wouldn't want that stuff on my network either, but the problem is that you're not actually protecting yourself from it by banning TPT. You're just making your teachers' lives hard. Every single one of your teachers knows they can get to those files on your network from a personal device running on mobile data, or I guess now they do. But with the exception of zip files, they can just email them. And, and I suppose your IT admins will have the ability to crack down on individual file types. They could like ban PDFs or zip files or Office files from the entire MCPS network, but I think we all know how that would turn out. I don't have a solution for you because beyond training and endpoint protection, because there really isn't a good one. Banning TPT shackles your teachers, while allowing it puts a real burden on IT staff. This was honestly an opportunity for the administration to lean into the faculty, the scaffolding of collective bargaining, and work with the various stakeholders to come up with a solution that is not maybe perfect for everyone, but is good enough for everyone. But instead, an arbitrary decision was made. An email went out, and a lot of teachers were surprised and upset. I'd like to see you do better next time. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Thomas. Our next speaker is Alicia Vaught.
Alicia Vaught, Christiansburg. Public schools were created to be the great equalizer. Horace Mann and the Common School movement believed every child, rich or poor, deserved a strong education in reading, math, history, and citizenship. The goal was simple: help kids succeed so our democracy and our economy could thrive. But today, something stands in the way: collective bargaining agreements between teachers' unions and school boards. These agreements promise higher pay, better benefits, and job protections, but they come at a cost to students. They're expensive, as we're finding out tonight, driving up property taxes year after year. More importantly, research shows real harm. Students exposed to strong collective bargaining earn about $2,100 less per year as adults, nearly 4% lower earnings. For Black and Hispanic men, losses rise to over 9%. They also work fewer hours and are less likely to stay in the workforce, not because they spent less time in school, but because the quality of education declined. Research from Caroline Haxby found unionized districts have higher dropout rates, about 2.3 percentage points higher, as resources shift towards salaries and lighter workloads instead of student outcomes. These contracts lock in seniority-based layoffs, rigid pay scales that ignore performance, and due process rules that make it extremely difficult to remove bad or ineffective teachers. That protects adults, but it leaves students stuck in classrooms where they're not getting the education they deserve. School boards often hand over their authority. They approve multi-year contracts that limit decisions on hiring, firing, and evaluations. Low turnout elections allow unions to help elect aligned board members, and once contracts are signed, boards can say our hands are tied. The result: adult interest, pay, security, and reduced accountability come before student success. But there is hope. In Florida, recent reforms made it easier for teachers to vote out unions that no longer serve them. Over 100 bargaining units have decertified, and studies show student test scores rising by more than 5% within 3 years, along with improved attendance. It's time to return our schools to their original purpose: kids first. Teachers, we value you, but school's not about you. It's about students. Right now, with CBAs, declining math and reading scores, and classrooms increasingly used to push one-sided ideologies, schools are shifting away from education and toward protecting adult systems. Schools are becoming an adult jobs program. Our children deserve better. Their needs should come first because school is supposed to be about them. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Vaught. Our next speaker is Matthew Fentress, followed by Crystal Fentress.
Good evening. My name's Matthew Fentress, 395 Summit Ridge Road, Christiansburg, Virginia. Speaking as an individual, thank you for the chance to speak tonight. For unseen circumstances, KIPS went through some leadership changes recently. I thank you for the wisdom of putting Glenn Chilcote into the interim principal position. He knows the staff, the students, their families, and the culture of KIPS Elementary. It was most positive outcome in a turbulent situation. Thank you. My fellow elementary teachers will understand why I'm thankful for collective bargaining and a little more planning time. I appreciate collective bargaining because it has created scheduled bathroom breaks. Anyone who teaches young children knows it sometimes feels like flagging down a taxi cab, trying to get someone to watch your class long enough to pee. Thank you. A clinical aide at an elementary school in Blacksburg Strand mentioned this morning to me that she was thankful for collective bargaining because she finally gets to take lunch. It is her 9th year in this position. For the last year and a half, she said she actually been able to take up a lunch break. Prior to that, she ate her lunch at her desk through a break, answering phones, letting visitors in, and other administrative work. Through collective bargaining, she felt empowered to step away from her desk for 20 or 30 minutes for a lunch break. She says, thank you. While attending this past weekend's Virginia Education Association's Delegate Assembly in Norfolk, Virginia, Carol Bauer, a president of the VEA, mentioned hearing from Montgomery County custodian, who is an MCA member, who mentioned how Montgomery County Public Schools collaborated with the MCA on an issue of collective bargaining, leading to proper tools for them to do their job, including a warm winter coat that she could not afford on her own. They are very thankful. Collective bargaining is not a tool to gain an unfair advantage. It is a tool to ensure the normal expectations at a job, such as having the ability to leave your desk or classroom to go to the bathroom, eat lunch, and having the proper tools to do your job effectively. Thank you for taking the time to collectively work with the MCA. Collective bargaining improves employees' working conditions, so remember, our working conditions are our students' learning conditions. Thank you. Literally ran in here. Have a good night.
Thank you, Mr. Fentress. Our next speaker is Crystal Fentress.
Good evening, Board. My name's Crystal Fentress. I reside with that guy at 395 Summit Ridge Road. And I just wanted to come up and say thank you for your past support of collective bargaining, because to me it's important that I have planning time and a lunchtime and time with my planning partner to make sure that I'm giving my best to my students, which I strive to do every day, but it also gives me a little time to have a little left to save for my family to give my best to them also. So for that, I thank you. I love having the time to do some things at school. No mistake about it, I still take it home with me, but I do have a little more time to give to my family. So while I'm pouring myself into others, other people's children, I also enjoy the time to pour a little more into mine. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Fentress. And seeing no other signups for public address is now closed. We'll move on to consent items. If no one wishes to move an item out of consent, we will consider those items approved. Next on the agenda are financial reports. Do I have a motion to acknowledge receipt of the financial summary report for March 2026?
So moved.
Second.
Dr. Roundtree and Mr. Roberts, any discussion? Ms. Reed, will you please call the roll?
Ms. Bond?
Yes.
Ms. Franklin?
Yes.
Dr. Guitry?
Yes.
Ms. Pardon? Dr. Roundtree?
Yes.
Ms. Purcell?
Yes.
I'm also a yes.
Mr. Roberts? 7 in favor.
Motion carries. Do I have a motion to approve the payment of bills as presented?
So moved. Second.
Ms. Franklin and Dr. Roundtree, any discussion? Ms. Reed, will you please call the roll?
Ms. Bond? Ms. Franklin? Dr. Guitry?
Yes.
Pardon?
Yes.
Mr. Roberts,
Yes.
Dr. Roundtree,
Yes.
Ms. Purcell.
Yes.
7 in favor.
Motion carries. Okay. That takes us to our business meeting. Our first item on the agenda is a report from the superintendent. Dr. Kelly Gimple will provide a report from the superintendent. Thank you, Dr. Gimple.
Yeah, good evening, everybody. Just a couple items on my report tonight. Really just some happenings. This is day 52 since I've been the superintendent of Montgomery County Public Schools, and really learning a lot about our division and enjoying every minute of it. Very impressed with what goes on in all of our school buildings, the leadership there, and of course, our outstanding teaching force is just doing a great job. So, but I want to update you a couple things. I visited Radford University just last week and spoke to some of our future educators and Dr. Wendy Eckenrod Green's classes. That was a great experience for me. They're very bright-eyed, ready to join MCPS. I hope I did a good job recruiting. But we have a good group of young folks coming up that are interested in being teachers over at Radford. So it was a pleasure to stop by there and speak with them. We're exploring an additional therapeutic day treatment center with other area superintendents in Pulaski County. You'll hear a little bit more about that as we move forward and start to do a little bit more research, but that's an exciting thing that looks like it could be on a horizon. Attended the Blacksburg Rotary Club meeting where several of our fine arts students received scholarships. That was exciting. 3 of our students there being recognized and receiving some money from the Blacksburg Rotary Club. So thank you to them for recognizing the outstanding, talented students that we have in our schools. Met with our lead librarians regarding some of their priorities and initiatives, and attended a unified track meet over at Blacksburg High School last Friday. That was outstanding to see those young athletes in action and giving 100%, and also watching the rest of the school cheering them on and taking part in that event. So that was a kind of a heartwarming thing, and lots of excitement out there, lots of smiles, and some good athletes out there performing. Visited Eastern Montgomery Elementary and High School just the other day. Beautiful schools, so well run. It's just great to see, when you walk into a classroom and you see the things that are going on in our schools firsthand. It's always a great time walking into our school buildings. Also attended last night's Board of Supervisors meeting, which I think lasted about 15 minutes. That was a pretty good record there. I think we're going to try and beat that at some point here, right? Other quick announcements. BHS hosted a speaker from MAD in partnership with Lewis Gale to talk about the dangers of distracted and drunk driving. The presentation was provided to all 11th and 12th grade students and was timely to happen right before prom. Copperhead Robotics, the MCPS robotics combined team placed 8th out of 119 teams recently and advanced to the World Championship. Again, just a testament to the type of leadership we have in our robotics teams and the type of children we have in our schools. EMHS hosted the CTE Takeover Day, giving students exposure to all kinds of careers and STEM programs. Well-attended event. We had lots of volunteers showing up from different businesses and presenting different things on CTE. We had pinwheels out front of our office and in front of many of our schools to show support for pinwheels for prevention, in regard to April being National Child Abuse Prevention Month. And a reminder that we are partners with let me say this in English, Imagination Library, where any child aged 0 to 5 years can receive free age-appropriate books mailed directly to their house. Anybody that wants information, has children, grandchildren, whatever, between 0 and 5 years old, please get on our website and access Imagination Library. That's my report for this week. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Dr. Gimple. Board members, were there any questions? It was a lot. Thank you for being part of our school division, Dr. Gimple. Our next item on the agenda is our MCEA update. Katie Seidemann, MCEA President, will present an update from the Montgomery County Education Association. And this is information, no action is expected. Thank you, Ms. Seidemann.
Thank you. Good evening, Chair Purcell, Dr. Gimple, members of the board, and our student representative. Thank you for allowing us to be here tonight to present to you a report on behalf of the Montgomery County Education Association. First, I'd like to give the board an update on our current collective bargaining negotiation process. As per the timeline stated in our resolution, we have shared with MCPS leadership our official topics for negotiations. The first being hours and scheduling, the second being health and safety. Within these two main topics, we will discuss and negotiate subtopics related to the working conditions of certified staff. Additionally, we have already had several conversations with Dr. Gimple and Dr. Widener intermittently as we prepare to begin our negotiations in May. We are excited to enter into these negotiations in good faith with MCPS, continuing the positive bargaining relationship we have had thus far. Speaking of collective bargaining, we think it best to address the elephant in the room. We are aware that there are some that have brought up concerns related to the costs of collective bargaining incurred by MCPS. I would like to reiterate that there are no costs related to our collective bargaining. Per our resolution, we are not permitted to negotiate salary and benefit at this time. We cannot negotiate money. As I mentioned to the board in my last report, there were some initial costs when this whole process began 6 years ago. During our representative elections, in which an overwhelming majority of MCPS staff voted that the MCEA would be their bargaining representative, the cost of the neutral third-party voting platform used was split between MCPS and the MCEA. The total cost was $1,582.50. Split between the two organizations was $791.25 for each organization, and this was a one-time startup cost. If someone were to argue that there are ongoing costs related to collective bargaining, that is a misrepresentation. There are potential costs to the suggested solutions of breaching the collective bargaining agreement, but these costs are not a direct result of bargaining as a practice. For example, before our collective bargaining agreement, many teachers were serving time on lunch duty during their own lunch times. Because our collective bargaining agreement states that now all certified staff will have a duty-free lunch each day, this can no longer be permitted per the CBA. When we brought up this discrepancy at the negotiating table, the suggested solution from MCPS was for teachers to submit a timesheet for any of their own lunch or planning time lost due to serving lunch duty. This was a logical, acceptable, and easy solution and was accepted by the MCEA due to its practicality and equitability. Again, the collective bargaining agreement simply states that all staff will receive a duty-free lunch each day. The costs come into play when the CBA is breached, and a solution must be found. Please don't misunderstand me. This was the best solution to this issue from MCPS, and both the MCEA and MCPS agreed that it was. But we did not suggest financial compensation as the solution because, again, we can't. Another example of a cost that has been attributed to collective bargaining is the cost of the winter weather apparel for support staff in the amount of $9,509.40. In Section 6D1 of the Classified Staff CBA, it states that MCPS shall provide the equipment necessary to ensure employee safety and health in the performance of their duties, including, when applicable, uniforms, clothing for work performed in inclement weather, and protective equipment when working with hazardous materials. Again, nothing about financial compensation was negotiated in the CBA. However, what this does highlight is that MCPS was not providing these items to our support staff before the CBA was in place, before they were required to. If the result of being in compliance with the CBA is an extra $9,500 so that our support staff have the protective equipment necessary to do their jobs, I would say that is not only a reasonable expense for MCPS, but a necessary one to ensure the health and safety of its employees. Nothing in our current CBA is outlandish, extravagant, or impractical. We're talking about coats, hats, and gloves, and $10 a day to cover lunch duty. If MCPS is seeing an estimated projected increase in costs by, $150,000 annually, in order to meet the working conditions laid out in the CBA, then maybe previously MCPS was underserving and overworking its employees. And this is simply the cost of righting those wrongs. We are moving in the right direction as a school system by engaging in collective bargaining. Since our first CBA was ratified, staff vacancies have decreased, Employee satisfaction with collective bargaining remains high, and employee retention at MCPS has decreased dramatically by your own data. There are those who would want our school board, our central office, and our community to be fearful of collective bargaining because they haven't taken the time to really understand it. There are those who would want you to take care of your money rather than take care of your people. This board voted in favor of the collective bargaining resolution back in 2023, 6-1. And the overwhelming majority of employee groups voted to ratify each of our 3 active contracts. MCPS is moving in the right direction, and all of the data supports that. Collective bargaining is a real way that MCPS can not only say that they support their staff, but they can actually show it. Don't be dissuaded. Don't backpedal. Don't be afraid. MCPS central office staff will be presenting more data with you related to the benefits of collective bargaining following this report. Following that presentation, along with central office staff, I invite any of you to ask any clarifying questions to me or our collective bargaining chair and vice president, Sarah Rope. We would love to provide you with important context regarding our CBAs, collective bargaining as a whole, or its effects on hiring and retention data. Thank you for your time. What questions can we answer for you tonight?
I don't have any questions, but I would like to thank you for the clarification. I'd like to thank everyone who came out to help support collective bargaining. And some of the concerns, unfortunately, that we hear from folks is they don't understand collective bargaining for public employees in the state of Virginia versus private, or collective bargaining for teachers and other school employees in other states, because it is different. And just like you said, you cannot bargain for your wages. And as far as our support staff having the equipment that they need to do their jobs, especially in the winter, that was something that has been discussed at this board a couple of times since I've been on it. And it was agreed we would supply those types of things and have had them come and thank us for those. So it's very disheartening to hear that we weren't continuing to do that and that now we are, making sure our employees are safe. Can you imagine going to a job and someone telling you, oh, you need to supply your own hazardous material protection, personal protection for dealing with hazardous materials? That would be ridiculous. I've never heard of that, and we should never have had people thinking they needed to do that. So thank you all for coming.
Thank you.
Board members, other comments? Dr. Guitry?
Yeah, if I could just ask a question. Thank you so much. I'm looking forward to the outcome of these deliberations. Are dues required of MCEA members or MCPS employees? How is it MCEA funded?
Sure. We do not have a membership requirement of staff. So when you are hired by MCPS, you are not required to join the union. It is by choice. And then MCEA members pay dues towards our local, which is the Montgomery County Education Association.
Okay, so if you're an MCPS employee, you're not forced to be a member or to pay dues to, right? Okay, because that historically has been one of the issues with unions, an attack against unions. Another is exclusion. So for instance, African Americans were excluded from unions while also having to pay dues as a result of their work. Do you exclude any member from MCPS?
Not
from
at
any
all.
of these, from MCEA?
Not at all. We encourage everybody to join. In fact, every single day I have a conversation saying, you should join the union.
Okay, great. Those are my only 2 questions. Thank you.
Yeah. And if I may just do more clarification with that, since Virginia is a right-to-work state, employees do not have to pay any union dues, but what they do get is all the benefits that are fought for and agreed upon by the folks who represent them, whether they want it or not. And they gladly take them all. I've never heard anybody turn down any benefit they get through the collective bargaining process. And trust me, I've done it a lot.
Other board members? Any questions?
Yeah, so thank you for the presentation. And also, as we have things that come up that we are underserving our staff, such as safety equipment, continue bringing them to us. We appreciate the help. If things don't get brought to us, then they can't be corrected. And having a advocate to speak out so that you're not called out as an individual person necessarily by administration is a nice thing for employees to have. So thank you.
Okay, so I'm going to say something that's not going to be, everybody's not going to like it, but I'm going to say it. When we did vote to have updates, I think our 5-minute updates has turned into something very different. So I have a question. Is this how they're going to continue to be? Because I remember when we voted this in that it was going to be a 5-minute update once a month. And it's turned into a question and answer. Or bringing what teachers think, what the MCEAs think. I believe that's what, in my opinion, collective bargaining roundtable discussion is about. So the roundtable discussion, to me, is spilling over into our updates. I may be the only board member that feels that way, and I can pull up that meeting that we talked about it being just a basic update for 5 minutes. But it's turned into something very different. So I am going to kind of stand my ground on that because I did vote to have that, but it's turned into something very different. And I believe earlier you did state that collective bargaining won with a 6-1 vote, but it didn't. It won with a 5-2 vote, along with the first agreement was 6-1, and that was in order for teachers to have lunches, along with the fact that if there were need, they would step up to the plate and do that. And I might be wrong, but I think I might have heard you mention at one of the updates that the MCEA felt, and I could be wrong, that lunch aids and recess aids were not one of the best ways to utilize some funding. Did I?
I never said that, no.
Okay, I'll have to go back. I thought it was. So to me, and hearing the speakers come and say that's a vital part, but I know I heard that. And so I was just kind of, wondering with the measure of that and how that works out. So just some of my comments. Probably going to pursue the fact of the 5-minute with no disrespect, just because it's turned into quite a long discussion. Last meeting it was that we had it, and tonight it has. So just to make that comment.
Yeah, no disrespect at all.
Okay.
You could put me on a timer if you'd like. I'll go down to 5 minutes. I'll go down to 3 minutes like they, during public address. Doesn't bother me at all.
Well, and I think that was the discussion of the meeting that we had decided, because it does give that, it gives you a platform when that's what collective bargaining is their own platform, and you have that opportunity to speak out. So the once a month, to me, update is just, this is what's happening, this is who's involved, this is, and I don't know if any of my other fellow board members agree, I'm sure they don't, but, okay, so.
I would be happy to do whatever the will of the board. The will of the board was to allow this report so that we could have that open dialogue, particularly so that questions could be asked when we began collective bargaining, because it was such a new concept. And we would bring, things would be brought to the board, and there would need to be context, and there was just not an avenue for us to provide context during a public meeting. So we wanted to have that context. So the first paragraph of my report tonight was related to our update. The rest was related to additional things that were brought forth that I felt were necessary to address, so that there was not misconstruing of the information, and so that, again, the board has all of that important context related to collective bargaining, so that you can make the best decisions for staff. And I would say that this is the communication from staff to the board. Collective bargaining is more of the agreements between the staff and the board, because truthfully, not everything needs to be in a collective bargaining agreement. Some things just need to be brought from staff to employer, and this is one of the ways that we could do that. But again, whatever be the will of the board is what we will do.
So 90% of the time when you stand there and you ask, are there any questions, after about 2 or 3 minutes, and there's none, and we're done. So I appreciate having the opportunity to hear, and quite frankly, for you all to have a public voice as to what actually is happening with our collective bargaining from the from the union, okay? So if we need to revisit how this is being done, then I would say we just need to revisit to make sure we're staying within whatever guidelines the board wants to set for this, or has set for this. So, but I appreciate it.
Board members, other questions?
It was just my knowledge when the board first agreed on having this update, that it was 5 minutes and that we would be getting that pertinent information from our superintendent, who the board, I believe, back then unanimously agreed to be the liaison between the board and the MCEA, and that the superintendent would be providing us with that information.
It actually does not read that way. It reads that a board member would be the liaison.
I'll just say that I think it's important to be as informed as possible. I think it's fine that it was the 5-minute agreement if we need to put the 5 minutes up, but the representative does not get to decide whether we ask questions or not, and we never, that was not part of the discussion of limiting the board's ability to ask questions. So to put that on the representatives that were asking questions, I don't think that's appropriate to constrain them. If you want us to constrain ourselves, that's a different matter. But as far as I'm concerned, I think it's important to be well informed as a board member.
I apologize, I did not have a timer going and I was taking notes, so I wasn't as carefully considering the time. I can't imagine that my board members would want to not ask questions. But if that is your will with this part of our meetings, I'll allow you all to let me know.
I have an endless love of brevity. However, I really appreciate coming up and giving us this information. It's obviously a contested issue. I don't think anybody has any misgivings about what side I am on collective bargaining. But I think it's very valuable that you are providing us with that financial information. I think it is quelling some concerns and fears that members in the community may have. If you can do it in 5 minutes, awesome.
Yeah, so I'm willing to be proven wrong. My recollection of the meetings where we discussed this presentation was that we kind of came to a 10 to 15 minute agreement. That would be the second meeting of the month because the second meeting is generally less busy and so forth. And this was towards the beginning of last year, or the school year, but my memory's not great anymore. But feel free to tell me what meeting it was and where it was, and we can have a vote next time on if we want to have a time limit, what the time limit is. I'm okay with an hour, but
I'm not.
I like brevity, but I also want all of the information that y'all need to present to us. So thank you.
Thank you.
Oh, thank you so much for being here tonight. Our next item on the agenda is the collective bargaining update. Dr. Kelly Gimple, Superintendent, will begin tonight's presentation on a collective bargaining update. The administration will share an overview of the impact of collective bargaining along with metrics for monitoring future outcomes. This is information and no action is expected. Thank you, Dr. Gimple.
Well, after that discussion, man, let me say, as a new superintendent here, and this is my 6th school division that I've worked in Virginia, and 31st year. Not dealt with anything to do with collective bargaining in my past roles, right? So I evaluate things on a couple circumstances for my own, edification here. My goal is to make Montgomery County Public Schools the very best school division in the state of Virginia. I've said many times that to do that, we've got to have students who want to come to school. We've got to have teachers who feel validated and valued. And we've got to include parents in that equation so that they feel informed and they're excited to send their kids to our schools. Tonight's presentation is not it's not an indictment or it's not an evaluation. It's simply, this is where we stand as far as collective bargaining. Here's some of the data that we were able to uncover. You're going to hear from many people on our staff. It's primarily very positive, right? Because at the end of the day, we're retaining teachers. Whether you can draw a direct line to collective bargaining, I'm choosing to do so. And if that's one of the things that is occurring, then I'm all for it because that has a great deal to do with the achievement of our students. The end result for all of this, right, while we're taking care of teachers and we're trying to retain them and we're trying to create the best environment for them to work in, is that we have to see the results on our student achievement, right? We have to see better attendance, we have to see less discipline, and we have to see our students performing at a higher level, right? Because we're providing provisions for teachers to be able to do a better job at their job and to enjoy their job more, right? More planning, less taking them off planning to do different things around the school, cover duties, cover lunch, things that are not impactful on the student performance indicators, right? We're evaluated really on one thing, and like it or not, and I'm not a fan of SOLs, never have been, but a large part of our evaluation is tied to how our students perform on those tests. You can hate it, you can love it. But when people talk about where they're going to move to in Montgomery County, I'm hearing I moved to this part of the county because the schools are better. Why do you think the schools are better? Well, look at their SOL scores. We are ranked across the state based on that metric. And there's some other things involved too, like attendance, right? Like behavior, some other things in there now with accountability. But largely, it's based on how our students are performing on these end-of-year tests, right? So my point is this, right? While we're retaining teachers and working hard to do that, which is a great, great thing, that's got to come first, right? We want our teachers back. We want them happy to be working here in Montgomery County. We want this to be the best working division for our teachers, and for teachers, we want to steal them from other divisions, right? We want the best of the best in our classrooms, leading our classrooms. The end goal, though, ultimately, right, is to prepare our students for their future to the very best of our ability, which really should be amongst the very best in the state. We have incredible resources here. We're surrounded by universities. We have a highly intelligent community. We have support from all over the place. The results should be very strong. And our goal, my goal, really, we're 30th right now in some rankings in terms of our division. It's to move up, right? It's to get in that top 10 area where we're recognized for the great educators that we employ here and the program that we employ them under, which is the CBA, right? We want to see those results. So this is really just sort of a lay of the land at this point. This helped me trying to get my own edification as to what is the impact of the CBA. And my staff has helped me to understand a little bit better by compiling some reports. We're going to go through a system-wide overview. We're going to go through the impact financially, obviously. We're going to go through the impact on the workforce and as far as retention. We're going to talk about organizational flexibility and what this does for like scheduling and things along those lines. We're going to talk about instructional impact for our students. We're going to talk about some equity and the impact there. We'll talk about operations and how it operates as just the day-to-day working of our schools. And then we'll talk forward about how we're going to monitor this going forward, because I wasn't able to uncover metrics for monitoring when I arrived, right? So we're kind of creating this as we go. This is an agreement between the MCEA and the school division, right? And you want it to be the very best agreement that works for everybody. We want our teachers to be happy in their buildings and wanting to come to work and wanting to work with our kids and wanting to do all the things that move our children forward, right? So to do that, if there's provisions within the MCA agreement, the collective bargaining agreement, that is fine. I am happy for it. I'm behind it. I just want to make sure that we always see the results at the end, which is, for our students. So we'll start tonight with talking about, you can go on the next slide, talking about the system-wide overview. Obviously, the collective bargaining agreement has wide-reaching impact on our organization, right? It really does provide a framework for employment of our teams, of our employment conditions, and really sets up some organizational processes across several different groups that are covered under their CBAs. We do want to make sure as we're creating another strategic plan here in the next 6 months or so that there's a great alignment between the MCA and collective bargaining agreements and our strategic plan. It's got to fit in there very well for us to move forward the way we want to. We have found, Tom has done some great research on this, put together some stats that you're going to see, that there is a relationship between retention and our CBA. That is a great thing. That is such a positive thing. And for me right now, that is one of the most important factors that we can point to. And you see at the very last statement there, it does talk about the tie-in between the CBA and how our students have performed, which again, our teachers want that, our administrators want that, our school board wants that, our community wants that. And so we want this to be working towards that end. Good, go on to the next slide. So staffing and workforce, this is Tom. Go ahead, yes sir.
Members of the board, at our last meeting, I went over some data that indicated that recruitment and retention rates are showing signs of improvement with fewer teacher and staff vacancies, increasing the number of returning educators and declining exit rates. Of course, stronger staffing stability can support student achievement. We called it at the last meeting, we called it the experience effect. And the longer we keep teachers in the classroom, the longer we keep employees in the building, the better off our performance levels are. MCPS is currently the only school division in Southwest Virginia with the collective bargaining agreements. Survey responses from prospective candidates, we surveyed 85 of them at our job fair, indicated varying levels of understanding regarding these agreements. Since Virginia has traditionally been a right-to-work state, collective bargaining has not been covered as much in colleges and universities as it has in other parts of the country that experience collective bargaining. At the same time, responses suggest that some individuals consider the presence of collective bargaining agreement as one of several factors influencing their decision to join or remain with Montgomery County Public Schools. Overall, early indicators point to potential impacts on recruitment, retention, and organizational stability, though these trends are influenced often by multiple factors.
Good evening. As we've presented to you before with the school performance and support framework, we do have an area of concern with our students with disabilities and their performance on our SOLs. But with collective bargaining, our teachers have 80 to 85 minutes for co-planning time, for their planning time that they can plan that specially designed instruction that our students with disabilities need. On the slide, you will also see 4 pieces of data that outline SOL data, student group data, discipline data, and attendance data. One big win for our collective bargaining agreement, the Virginia Department of Education average of students with disability caseloads for our special education teachers is 24 to 1. So a teacher would have up to 24 students on a caseload. At MCPS, we rounded up from 10.8 to 11 to 1 in our division, and that is due to our collective bargaining agreement. With all of this, we continue to still focus on co-planning, our co-teaching, our specially designed instruction, and making sure that we are aligning to our standards.
Good evening, Madam Chair, school board members, Dr. Gimple. I want to give you an overview of the operational impact of the CBA on our school division. I think when we look at this, we have to focus on balancing two things, employee welfare and then the realities of school operations. So one of the perceived benefits of the CBA is that it is an opportunity to enhance operational clarity and workload management. Because the agreement establishes clear definitions for things like responsibilities, duties, and work hours, this has kind of reduced ambiguity and really has been a strong effort to promote consistency across the school division. It is also an effort to proactively address staff well-being, and we've seen that in survey results. It does require some strategic coordination because while these structures are in place to protect our staff, they do require some more coordination, such as overseeing student supervision. We can see that staff strongly value having defined work orders, and these protections are certainly vital, as Dr. Brewster has indicated, for employee retention and supporting staff well-being. The trade-off is that we do have to, when we introduce some of these parameters around things like meeting times, it does create some limits in administrative flexibility. So the challenge is just working through to make sure that we are engaging in advanced levels of planning to ensure that these things are in place and operations are being covered while not infringing upon the protected time that the CBA agreement provides to our staff. Clearly, we can see that in terms of staffing and coverage, that this is an effort that has boosted employee morale and job satisfaction, but it does kind of shift how we kind of manage some of these daily logistics, because in order to ensure that student supervision is being covered, it does require more oversight on behalf of our administrators to look at how we're managing that and how we're covering things like lunch, providing 30 minutes to our staff while also making sure that we have adequate supervision of our students.
Good evening. Next, I will review the financial impact to the school district. To date, the total actual labor costs are $113,500. This amount includes compensatory time, overtime, and teacher lunch duty stipends. The total projected cost for these categories for the full fiscal year is approximately $158,000. As a result of the collective bargaining agreement providing the 30-minute paid lunch, the employee's active work time has been reduced by 30 minutes per day. Consequently, any recorded overtime or compensatory time for the support staff now includes the additional 30 minutes, and that's attributable to this paid lunch period. In addition, if a teacher is assigned to perform lunch duty during their planning period as provided in accordance with the agreement, they are eligible to receive a lunch duty stipend at a rate of $20 per hour. As an enhancement to employee benefits, the agreement also includes a provision requiring that up to 5 annual leave days be converted beyond the 36-day cap to sick leave each fiscal year. At this time, we are unable to provide a projected cost associated with this change. Previously, those unused days were forfeited to the employer. If you were unable to use the time beyond the 36 days, those additional days were forfeited. As you're aware, employees are accumulating annual leave as we go along, so we wouldn't have an estimate on the actual cost of that until approximately sometime in June, but we'd be glad to get that information back to you at that time. And a link to the detailed labor cost data has been provided as well in the slide for your review. Additionally, the Facilities Department purchased winter weather apparel for the custodial staff in accordance with the agreement at a cost of approximately $9,509. These items proved to be a valuable investment. They were used extensively through the winter season. As you know, there were some pretty cold days, and so those coats and those gloves did come into play, and they very much appreciated those. It's important to note that the current fiscal year budget was finalized prior to the completion of the collective bargaining agreement for support staff. So those costs were not included in this budget, so at this time we are absorbing those with existing resources. However, now that we have projected costs, we have included those with the proposed fiscal year 2027 budget. I'd like to highlight a couple of early benefits that we're observing in the finance department. We are starting to see a reduction in payroll adjustments. That's huge for our department. We greatly appreciate that time that we get back when we don't have to do that. While it may be early to attribute those directly to collective bargaining, we do believe that the decreased employee turnover is playing a role in that. Just in our area alone, we're seeing an improvement in employee morale. With the duty-free lunch, it provides staff with greater flexibility, and it gives them valuable personal work time during the workday. And finally, the Facilities Department would like to also note that they received several phone calls with expressed appreciation for the winter weather apparel that was provided. Thank you.
I want to talk a little bit about the impact on organizational flexibility and management. And really, when we look at this part, it's kind of understanding the intersection of the collective bargaining agreement and the day-to-day management of the school division's organizational culture and operational efficiency. One thing the collective bargaining agreement has introduced and supported is this idea of collaborative decision-making as well as accountability. The seat at the table approach is really an effort to involve all staff in decision-making processes. And so this has kind of shifted our administrative focus towards more inclusion and collaboration. That does create a balancing act for us, because our leadership now has to work on balancing this inclusive approach with the requirement to maintain operational efficiency and clear accountability for student outcomes. We have, through our surveys, noted that there have been some inconsistencies in how the CBA expectations are applied to across the school division, so that may be an opportunity and a point for us to refine and improve on going forward. Another important thing to point out is that flexibility supports innovation. So where we have been able to provide more planning time, reducing caseloads, and giving some flexibility in lesson plans, those are efforts that can directly support professional creativity and possibly prevent burnout. So those are benefits. And again, it becomes a matter of balancing that. So we want to be able to support that capacity for innovation by giving teachers more time, but we have to balance it by being able to address the logistics of student supervision and making sure that we're kind of harmonizing that protective time with the need to provide that active supervision. So again, it's finding that balance. But again, the culture of collective bargaining really should serve as a framework to strengthen the partnership between staff and leadership. So ongoing efforts should keep both sides aligned on a shared mission, which, as Dr. Gimple indicated, is positive student outcomes. And the last thing that going forward, as we move forward and look for areas to refine and improve, there are a couple discrepancies in the collective bargaining agreement that don't entirely align with policy, but those are things as we go forward where we can make adjustments to find that common ground.
Madam Chair, Dr. Gimple and board members, good evening. I am here to talk to you about the impact of equity, that the collective bargaining has on equity. Distribution of benefits across employee groups. So we have a very diverse county. Our students in different communities need different things. And so we believe that collective bargaining does help with that and helps to make sure that all of our areas geographically in our county are getting the things that they need to support our students. Impact on high-need schools or student populations. Protected planning time has a great potential to improve student outcomes. As Dr. Brewster stated, longevity is also something that the collective bargaining can help us with when it comes to our employees. Alignment with equity goals and staffing resources. The reduction in vacancies is something that we continue to see and that we are watching clearly as we do our new minority retention plan called We Reach. And you have a link to be able to see that, to make sure that we're reaching all of our employees, that they know that they are appreciated and they get the things that they need. Some potential disparities that it could cause is standardization sometimes can just cause problems. So if I'm at a high need school, so like we have those schools in our division right now that are off track. And so in those schools, for those teachers, sometimes the disparity can feel like I'm being punished for trying to do my job as well as I can. So we just want to make sure that while we have the flexibility, that we are also considering those teachers who have to work in those high need schools. It also can limit the flexibility of niche roles like special education teachers. Even though we have a very low caseload compared to other places in the in the state, we also know that special education to do IEPs, that takes more time than even the 80 to 85 minutes sometimes may have. And so we don't want our employees who are working hardest for our students with the most needs to feel like they are being punished for doing the job that we have assigned them to do. Some schools may be required to submit weekly lesson plans while other schools are not. And this can sometimes give the perception of inconsistency or inequities for our employees. Maximum meeting times and event times might limit the things that we need to use to support our families and to pull us together. Like if we can only have so many meetings per year after school or during these times, that might not be at the key times that we need to have them. Like right now, we're getting ready for SOL testing. We want to get everybody pumped up. We want to get our kids pumped up, but we can't invite families to SOL days when we don't have staff to be there to greet them and to be with them and to help them to understand the importance. Lastly, autonomy over lesson plans. This has to be a flexible dance between our administration and our teachers to just making sure that our lesson plans are meeting the needs of all of our students and our families, especially those ones who are underserved. Lastly, collective bargaining can be a powerful tool that helps advance equity, but its success depends on the way we balance employee flexibility and ensuring that the decisions that we make are student-centered, because that is why we are here. So I'll just leave you with one question as we go forward. How do contractual rights intersect with existing resources and achievement gaps? And we need to make sure that as we're going forward with this, that we are looking at those things. Thank you.
All right, so we're going to talk a little bit about some recommended actions going forward. The first thing is, when I applied for the position here, I couldn't find collective bargaining anywhere on our website. It's very difficult to ascertain that we are a division that has a collective bargaining agreement. I do think it's a recruitment tool, and so we need to get that word out a little bit more. We have some struggling divisions around us where there's probably some teachers that are looking around for their next job. I'd love to be able to publicize the fact that we have an awesome agreement here for our teachers and bring them here. Also with retention analytics, we just developed that. That is a report that our board probably wants to see very often. And it's something me as a superintendent, I want to see throughout the school year to make sure that this is resulting in the retention of our staff. We need to update the MCPS board policy. Our board policy doesn't quite match up with the provisions in the CBA. So that's something Mr. Robert will be looking at, I'm sure, sometime in the near future, along with Leah Bressler, to try and make sure that the board policies are aligned with the CBA. Broader stakeholder involvement. From what I understand, the previous superintendent was the only person sitting at the negotiating table. And the rest of the folks that you see sitting over here were not part of that. Going forward, we need to have that involvement because a CBA really does impact so many different areas of the division. Having principals at that table, having some of the staff that you see sitting in front of you at that table is going to be really important to make sure that this is an agreement that really works for the benefit of the entire school division that's focused on our teachers. And next, there are some model guidelines out there. One of them is the VSBA. There's some other groups that have some model guidelines that we need to reference to make sure that we're not just creating something from scratch where there may be already some great ideas out there that we can borrow and use in our agreements. You can go to the next slide. I do want to mention, too, that I shared this presentation previously with the MCA. We had our communications meeting, and so we went over this, I guess, last week. Was that right, Katie? Yep, they came by and we showed them the exact presentation, just in the really in the vein of transparency and making sure that we weren't just springing this on our MCA members or on our teachers, and just to make sure that, you know what, we're going to work together. That is the goal here. We're going to work together on behalf of our students and our staff to make sure that the agreements are to the benefit of this school division. And we wanted to set that precedent early. I've not worked with them very closely on any type of negotiations, so going forward, that's how I'm going to approach the negotiations. That this is a partnership, and it's intended to make sure that, you know, our schools are thriving and that our students are achieving and that our teachers feel respected. So metrics for continuous monitoring, and this is an important part of anything we do, right? We want to know where we stand at all times, right? So vacancy and retention rates. So we're going to be monitoring the recruitment and retention data, gather annual feedback on clarity, understanding, and impact of the CBAs, and also create metrics to measure minority retention. Very important to monitor employee satisfaction, student achievement, discipline, and attendance. I think I've talked about that enough, but that's got to be the end goal here, right? We all got into education, you know, not to join a union, you know, right? Not necessarily to make agreements, but we all got into education because we love kids and we want to see them to be the most successful that they can be. And we have responsibility there. At the same time, we got to take care of staff to make sure that happens. We have to monitor the budget variance and any type of cost tracking that needs to be taking place on an ongoing basis. So that report should be available to our board at any time and to our public. Operational efficiency measures, right? Making sure our schools can run efficiently and effectively at all times. You know, if we have a school that's getting into trouble academically, there may be need for provisions there. We may need to make the agreement or talk to our MCA members about, hey, we got to make some exceptions here on the number of days that you have to stay after school. And you'll want to do that because it's to the benefit of our kids and families, right? So we got to build in some leeway there. And basically, we need to continue the MCPS and MCA communication meetings to further enhance the CBA to make sure it's a great working document for all of us. That concludes, again, this was not an indictment or an evaluation. This is really just, here's where we're at. We didn't share every single piece of data that we have highlighted there. Anybody can go ahead and click on that, or now if you have questions about any of those highlighted links, we can certainly click on those and speak to those. But we didn't want this to be a 2-hour presentation. We wanted this to be a synopsis of what we found and where we're sitting at right now. And from this point, I'll turn it over to the board.
Thank you so much, everyone who worked extremely hard over many weeks to pull all of this together and for being here tonight. Board members, would anyone like to start with questions?
I don't have any questions, but I will say this was a tremendous amount of work. I thought the way this was presented was very clear. It's very easy for me to follow, and I'm sure it's as easy for the public to follow as well. I think the presentation speaks for itself.
Well, I'm just going to follow up and say, Dr. Roundtree, you were right. When I'm wrong, I'm wrong. And I say it. On October 22nd, 2024, the work session, that you did do the amendment to the meeting about having up to 15 minutes, but it's a presentation. And the discussion that we did have was in lieu of the fact of meetings going so long, that it would be a simple presentation. And I think that is my question, or was my statement, is because I believe it's turned into more than that. That's my concern. It's not a matter whether it was 5 minutes or 10 minutes or 12 minutes or whatever. It's just the fact that as board members, and that's fine if those board members choose to do so, but that's not, I don't believe what I voted for was us to have a question and answer or a statement type. That's not what it was originated, in my opinion, to be so. But you were right, it was up to 15 minutes, and that meeting is on October 22nd of 2024. So I did want to clarify that and correct myself.
Other board members? Mrs. Parton?
Yes. So got a couple questions I'm going to ask at the end, but bear with me because I went back and dug up some information that I think probably needs to be reiterated and maybe remembered, and just to show where I stand and have always stood. Again, thank you for the information. I know it was very time-consuming, and for the presentation and for the explanation. I really do appreciate it. I know all of our employees appreciate it. Thank you to everyone who took the survey, and I know our community appreciates it. So I want to begin by saying I have always been a very strong supporter of doing what is best for all of our staff members, however, keeping student success at the priority. While doing so, I want to commend the board on their support for all staff. If I recall correctly, I've always voted for staff raises and benefits every time that it has come before the board. I have also been actively voting for measures that have supported our staff for over the past 8 years. Just using this year as an example, we increased the salaries of critical support staff positions, added designated paraprofessional subs at every school, added assistant principals so that every school, elementary school, now has a full-time assistant principal. And in this year's budget proposal, we have included funds to continue increases for support staff, raises for all employees, and to maintain health insurance and benefits. I am extremely proud of the board's efforts to continue to support our staff. I also commend the work we have done to support our staff and firmly believe in supporting our staff with or without collective bargaining. While the presentation mentions several results of collective bargaining, I do not know that you can show a distinct or factual correlation to things mentioned, like the attendance rates, SOL scores, to collective bargaining, or as to retention. I'm not asking the staff to try to do that, since I don't think that collective bargaining is necessary for our support staff. What I do want is I want to know that I know we have a collective bargaining agreement, and I understand that. I want to continue to support our staff, either with collective bargaining or by simply through voting, as we have always done, as we have listened to people from every department come before us with our needs and tell us what they wanted or what they needed. I do share the same concern that the VSBA, who is the Virginia School Boards Association, did express in their February memo regarding concerns about collective bargaining, and I quote, "VSBA has grave concerns about the financial impacts of SB 378 will have on school boards and local governments. I also want to mention that the Virginia Association of School of Superintendents also oppose collective bargaining. So if there are no costs that would conspire from collective bargaining, I don't know why there would be such opposition from these two organizations in Virginia that would want to oppose that. As shown, associated costs, which is basically approximately $158,000 in actual dollars, but over $2 million from July to November and lost productivity. I want to continue to make sure that in future negotiations, the right people are at the table to determine if there are any unintended consequences, such as lost productivity and admin concerns on how to implement any measures of financial impacts. I feel we have a responsibility to be very careful and ensure we don't agree on measures that will create an unsustainable condition of financial obligations to ourselves or others. In our decision, we need to ensure agreements don't have any negative impact on our students or impact safety. As I have stated, I have always supported measures that I think are good for staff and students, and I will continue to do so. However, I can also say that I'm committed to being financially responsible, to putting our students first. Furthermore, while we're making all of these amendments and changes to the requirements for teaching contracts, there has to be gain in student academic performance that is equated to this. Otherwise, why are we doing it? Thank you. And I do have a couple of questions. So I brought up the fact about the productivity loss. Can someone come up and explain that? We were given that information back in December by our interim superintendent.
I believe you're mentioning due to 30-minute paid lunch. Is that the chart that you're referring to, the productivity?
We were shown on the slide that the dollar amount, and so I'm asking, what is that? How is that pertaining to productivity loss? I should be more clarifying in what I'm asking.
You're good. Good. So the collective bargaining agreement, the eligible employees who receive the 30-minute duty-free lunch, if you take each one of those employees and you take their hourly rate and divide it in half, which would provide for that cost for the 30-minute lunch, and you multiply that by the number of contracted days that they're required to work, that's how we came up with that cost. So that's just active work time that is a loss, and that's considered productivity loss. Now, there is no financial cost to that. Employees still receive the same amount of pay. There's no change to salaries. It's just in a productivity accountability.
Right. So I knew we had talked about the financial, but I wanted to touch more on the productivity because I don't think that was really brought up in the presentation as a piece of the agreement. The second question I had was the breakdown on the collective bargaining agreement staff survey, where I was a little surprised, kind of, sort of, to see that there were major differences between teachers, support staff, central office admin, and building admin on how they felt about collective bargaining. Just wanted to clarify that teachers, strongly positive, support staff, moderately positive, central office admin, negative, and building admin, strongly negative. That's into the working conditions area. And when it was broken down on the complexity to daily operations, the building admin say the complexity was very high, central office high, support staff neutral, slight agreement, and the teachers disagree. So does anyone want to speak to the major differences in those categories and what we can do to try to see what we can do to make there not so much of a difference in how people felt about this?
I can speak to it. So when you break down the survey, yes, there were varied perspectives on how people responded to the benefits of collective bargaining, and you can break them down by employee group. The largest group that responded to the survey were our certified staff, which were teachers, counselors, specialists, and the majority of their responses were positive about the benefits of collective bargaining. When we look at the administrative staff that responded, which was about 8% of the respondents, there were more people who did not strongly agree with the statements about the benefits of collective bargaining. And again, I think that reflects what I talked about with some of the operational components, is that we have to strike a balance between the provisions and the protections that we're offering our staff and the logistics and the planning that go into it to make those things happen, while still, providing adequate supervision for our students and also focusing on student outcomes. So again, it is finding that balance. So I think the survey data reflects that.
If I can add something to that too, and I think part of the reason for that is, we've talked in a number of different circles here about MCA members. Part of the agreement is that they have a seat at the table, right? And it's agreement between the parties. Well, some of the folks that are impacted by this weren't a part of that original agreement, right? You didn't have principals sitting at the table. You didn't have folks here. And that's why we're going to do things a little differently. So this is something that we can all be proud of, right? At this point, I think you do have some folks that felt like, wow, if I could have just had some input there, I could have predicted that this would have been something that would be more difficult, right, than it needed to be, because they weren't there to be able to voice that opinion. So I think going forward, and I think the MCA is very supportive of the fact that, more folks will be at that table to come up with the very best agreement for everybody, right?
Well, and I'll be honest, Dr. Gempel, I was surprised when I found out that there was just the superintendent sitting there. I assumed that there would be all of the people there together to voice any concerns, which I think hopefully will help with the discrepancy and the disagreements of so many of these areas. So maybe hopefully we can get principals to the table, admin to the table, and finance to the table, and from this point forward.
Absolutely. Yes, ma'am.
Board members, other?
Yeah.
Dr. Roundtree?
So thank you for that perspective. Your counterpart on the Board of Supervisors from your district brought up the fact that the Virginia Superintendent Association did not support collective bargaining during one of our liaison meetings as well. Looking into that a little bit more detail, it's not that they don't support collective bargaining, it's that they don't support compulsory collective bargaining. There is a difference between our current collective bargaining organizations and compulsory collective bargaining, where employees are forced to participate with dues and membership, as Dr. Guitry was asking earlier, in the collective bargaining process. The same thing is true of the Virginia School Board Association's support of Senate Bill 378. It's compulsory compulsory obligations to it that were not in support, not collective bargaining as was presented a couple years ago by the Senate and House and approved.
So I verified with the VSBA president to make sure that I was correct in making the statement that I wasn't saying that they weren't supportive of it. What they're not supportive of is rural areas such as ours be making to feel like that collective bargaining, even though they're saying there's no cost tied to it, be put in a financial strain because they know that areas like ours can't compete with Northern Virginia and that money. So I think that was more what I was leaning to, not the fact that they were saying no to collective bargaining, but I think they were looking at more of the rural area financial impact that it could get some school boards and local governments in. And that was what I was trying to make by saying that.
Thank you. Yeah, I'm just stating to the letter of the word that they put out and the law, that is what the VSBA and the Virginia Superintendent Association said. A perspective of an individual in the organization should be taken as the perspective of an individual in the organization, just as my perspective as an individual board member is not the perspective of this board.
Okay, so I'll just carry that a little bit further. So I was a member, or I am a member of the VSBA Collective Bargaining Task Force, which is made up of people across the state, superintendents, board members, attorneys. I know, I kept trying to say we don't need them, but they showed up anyway. And one of the big things, it wasn't necessarily just the compulsory, anyway, it was the mandatory bargaining, which meant that every school district in the state of Virginia had to go into collective bargaining. That was one of the big issues. And it was even for me, that if that were to have passed, and since Montgomery County and several other districts in the state have already reached agreements, that we would have to start all over again. And if there wasn't some kind of grandfather in for the process and the work that we had already done, that would just be wiped away. And that should not have happened, should not happen. So as far as because we had many discussions around the impact on rural districts, and this, quite frankly, with any district, because one of the things that people always think about when they talk about collective bargaining is money. And money is not always what is put in place or what is needed to help with morale and help with making sure our staff is being valued, as we heard tonight. Some warm clothes, being able to just have a seat at the table and have the conversation. These are things that people value, sometimes much more than money. I know whenever I negotiated a contract and I was presenting it back to the membership, we never presented the money first. We presented the language to let people understand this is the language that impacts you every single day, not just that contract, not just the financial impact, because the financial impact could be great, but if you're never allowed to do anything or the restraints are so terrible, you feel like you're being smothered on the workplace, what good's the money, right? I'd rather walk away than be able to come to work and enjoy doing my job, which in this case is to educate our students. So there's that financial impact, and again, the productivity loss that we were shown, again, is misleading because it is not a big productivity loss, because for the biggest part, it's allowing folks to have time to eat lunch and maybe go pee, right? So that is not a productivity loss. It is something we should be allowing and be glad to have our employees be able to recharge themselves in one way or another.
Okay. Thank you for the presentations. I have two questions. The first was, at the Board of Supervisors meeting, there was a charge that our student achievement hasn't improved. Is that an accurate assessment of our performance over the period of the collective bargaining agreement? I don't know if there was something about our student performance. I don't know if you could address that. Instructional and student impact.
Go ahead to that slide.
If you go back to that slide. So I know that there's a link. I'm not asking you to actually go into the weeds with the SOL, but if you could address the accusation or the charge or the critique of that Board of Supervisor member about student achievement. Has it plateaued? Has there been no improvement?
Do you know which years they were talking about?
Let's just say in general terms. I don't want you. I'm not asking you to get into the weeds, but you're overall over the period of the collective bargaining agreement over the last 3 years.
Dr. Guthrie. So if you look at the chart that we have on the screen right now, if you look between certainly between 2023 and 2024 and 2024-2025 school years, you are seeing slight gains really across the board as you look down that chart, right? There are some pockets, particularly in individual schools, where those gains are not recognized, and there's been a few drops, but across the board, there's been some very marginal gains. So absolutely, there's been some gains year to year, at least over 23, 24, 24, 25, which is the latest data we have. We're really hoping that when this next batch of data comes out shortly, right, hopefully we'll get that late May, that we're showing some really good gains, and it's really reflective of the amount of planning time and just the energy that's in our schools amongst our our teachers.
Okay, great. And one of the things that that's not captured here is I know that there's an all-time high with registration, I believe, this year for AP exams. So there are, and I think in one school, it might be up to 1,700 that are taking AP exams, which means they're not they're not all participating in SOL exams. So as the number of AP classes increases and the number of students who are taking AP classes increases, you're not seeing the SOL scores in tandem increasing for the students because they're not taking the SOL scores, correct?
That is correct, particularly in the area of writing. If you look at our writing scores, you look at Blacksburg and look at Auburn and some of the other schools on there, that's really not reflective of the ability of our students, because the higher echelon scoring students are taking those AP exams. The kids in the AP classes are taking AP exams, which is a substitute test. They don't have to take the SOL. And so they're not. And so we're not collecting, that group of students in this data. And that certainly compromises our data quite a bit, particularly in the area of writing.
And that's a large number of students. It's only
is.
increasing.
We actually have a fantastic representation of students that are in AP classes that score 3, 4s, and 5s, and do extremely well. So that is something that it's very hard to depict this accurately in the area of writing. Now, some of the other subjects, not so much, but definitely writing.
Okay, appreciate that. And that's not to say that we can't improve. Obviously, we need to improve, and there are some areas of concern, but I just wanted to address that one charge. Thank you very much. The other question I want to ask about is the so-called costs projected. It was just brought up at $158,000. So if we could talk just briefly about so-called costs from the CBA. So prior to the agreement, there were employees who were receiving stipends and extra compensation for extra tasks. So for instance, a homebound teacher, they have their regular duties and they receive a salary from those duties. If they become a homebound teacher and provide additional services, they're compensated correctly?
Yes, that's correct.
And how are they compensated?
Generally through stipends, very similar to what you're seeing here for the lunch duty, yes.
Right, so does the division consider that lost productivity if they have a teacher who says, I'm willing to be a homebound teacher and support one of my students, and I'm going to get a stipend for that? Does the division consider that lost productivity?
No, and actually that was not included in the productivity slide. That was just an actual cost. So when we were talking about lunch duty stipends, they are not considered at all for productivity. So that is actually removing them from their planned period that's included in the agreement. And because they're doing that, they receive a stipend. So that's an additional cost in addition to their salary to the district.
Okay, because it becomes a slippery term. If you just throw out, okay, there's these lost costs, it makes it seem like our employees are being less productive as a result of the CBA, but that is not the case. They're being compensated for extra duties, correct?
Sure, yes, and the productivity chart was all based on the 30-minute duty-free lunch. So prior to collective bargaining, the contracted employees who received this 30-minute lunch, they were working, the majority were working 8-hour days, and they had their unpaid lunch of half an hour, whatever that may be. So previously, they just weren't receiving that 30-minute paid lunch. So that is what's calculated as the productivity. So now, instead of working the 8 hours, they're working 7.5 with a half an hour paid lunch.
Okay. Okay, thank you, because I think that there's a misnomer there. If we're paying them for duties, for things that they're doing, they're being productive during that time.
Yes, sir, yes. And the teacher lunch stipends are not included at all in those productivity totals. It's just for the 30-minute duty-free lunch.
Okay, so that they can have lunches. Okay. Great. That seems pretty simple to me. So I just like I know that one of the recommendations is for tracking the costs, and so I'm a little ambivalent about that. I'll be honest, because if we're just paying them for the work that we're doing, what is the difference between they're being paid for because of the CBA versus what they are being paid for their other duties?
Yeah, so
I don't understand the difference.
So that's part of the reason why that was not part of our presentation at all.
Yeah.
Because trying to equate that and trying to quantify productivity, just difficult to put a number on it, right? So when we're talking about monitoring costs going forward, it truly is paid dollar amounts going forward that we wouldn't have to pay otherwise. It may be negligible. We're going to see, and we're going to chart, but we're going to chart that to make sure.
Yeah.
Yeah. So lost productivity will not be, because you can't, right? Because not everybody has the same duties. Not everybody has the same responsibilities. It's very hard to equate and to quantify that, right? I think the attempt was to kind of see it's just a cost year over year. But again, it's not actual money being paid out. No one's getting an extra bump in their salary because of it. So that's all part of the reason why it was not included in this presentation. That was something done prior to me arriving here.
Yeah.
And it's not something that I'm going to use as a metric, because it's just incredibly hard to quantify, right? So
Right.
instead of doing that, we're actually looking at just actual dollars paid out, if there is some associated with the agreement. And again, $158,000 for the cost of retaining our teachers and our scores improving, I'll take that any day.
Yeah.
Right? I'll take that as a benefit to our children, a benefit to our teachers. Hey, that's a cost that we should be willing to eat, right? Because man, it's having a great benefit on our school division. But again, we want to see that over time too.
And I appreciate that. I just think that, there are stipends being paid to a number of employees, like coaches get stipends, correct? Right.
Not
There are lots of positions for which there are stipends being paid homebound. They're being paid stipends. That's not been politicized. So it just makes me anxious when we start to use certain language about compensation for work that our employees are doing. And I feel like they should be compensated for. Yeah.
I think one of the things that I mentioned when this agreement was actually being formed, the budget process had already started. That happens a lot. We have things that actually go into place following the budget, just because the budget cycle, as we all know, goes for many, many months to get that complete. And you can't add items after the fact for that process. So for this current year, these costs were not considered. Again, $158,000, we're using existing resources, and that'll be okay. We're able to track these, and that's one of the purposes of tracking them, because then we're able to put those in future budgets, and we're able to look at those costs. So the budget that's before you now, and that we're working through to come up with a final figure, we do have additional overtime costs to take care of some of these additional costs that may be incurred.
Board members, other comments? Ms. Bond?
I just kind of want to make a comment on some of the things we've been talking about. We've been talking about duty-free lunches, and when we were having all these conversations, I don't think there's anybody on this board, whether you want collective bargaining or whether you don't, want to see any teacher do without lunch. I don't think there's anybody on this, and I've been on the board 20 years, and again, to comment on what Ms. Parton said, not any of us have ever voted against a teacher getting anything, a coat. If that would have been brought forward, whether we had collective bargaining or not, I believe, and if it were brought forward, it never was brought forward to me. Never have I heard of that one time. When I heard that was presented was the first time I had heard that. My daughter is a lunch recess aide in the wintertime. My daughter-in-law, excuse me. If she needed a coat, you better believe I'm going to fight for that. And anybody else who would need it. So that was the first time this board member ever heard anything of that need. And the board that I sit on, I would like to think we would support anything within our reason to do that. And if I recall, the lunch discussion that we had, it wasn't about any teacher not being able to get lunch. It was the fact for me how important sometimes some students needing the fact of being able to sit down and eat lunch with their teacher. How important that was to them. How that made some children's day. Maybe that's was an old way of looking at things, but for me, and the movement was to learn the whole child, to be able to, understand each child. And not saying you can't do that in your classroom, sure you can, but being able to sit and have lunch with some students made a huge impact. And like I said, maybe it doesn't anymore. So it wasn't about not wanting to pay for me as a board member, any teacher, or for them to have lunch. It was about the fact that, it sometimes made such an impact to a student to be able to have lunch with their teacher. If that's not what our teachers want, then so be it. We can move forward to that. But this board that I've sat on for 20 years, I feel like has had the utmost concern for what happens in our schools for students and teachers. Is it what everybody wants? Maybe not. Or do we have the money to do what everybody needs or everybody wants? Maybe not. But again, I don't think there's been a stipend that's come down, or a bonus or a pay increase that this board hasn't voted unanimously to give when it was needed, whether it was bus drivers needing higher pay, whether it's facilities needing higher pay, teachers' raises. I can't remember exactly what we set our planning period time, but if I'm not mistaken, it's higher than most counties have. So I feel like we try to go above and beyond for our staff as much as possible. And I just hate to see sometimes these things, the way they look, oh, well, gosh, they're not doing this or they're not doing that, when really I would hate to think that that is the picture that's painted of this board, because I don't believe it is.
Thank you, Ms. Bond. Ms. Franklin?
Okay, so I'll just have to speak to that again, because twice during employee presentations with budget, that has been something that has been brought up. And at one time, the board talked about it and said, yeah, this is something we're going to do. And from what we heard, it was done for a short period of time, but evidently it wasn't consistent. And these are for our grounds people and our custodians who are out there in the cold shoveling and doing whatever need they have to do. And I think that's what they were speaking about tonight also. So yeah, that has been talked about during my time on this board twice.
But my question is, did we turn that down? I mean,
well, it was done evidently for a period of time because there were folks who said thank you, but then evidently the practice stopped. And that's what collective bargaining and having an agreement says. This is something that will happen. It is in writing, and we don't have to worry about things we discuss. And this administration says, okay, let's make sure we buy this stuff for those folks who are employed right now, but folks who may come later, it just kind of gets forgotten because nobody's written it down and said, this is what we're going to do. This is what we have to do for these employees.
Dr. Gimple?
Yeah, I just want to thank my staff for the reports and the presentation. And thanks to MCA for being here tonight as well for this presentation. Yeah, and thanks for the comments.
All right. Yes, I also want to thank everyone that put the presentation together. And I just have two quick things that I want to say. We did have an estimate in an earlier presentation that's in here again about the cost of unfilled teacher positions, which can be between $11,000 and $25,000. Just on the personnel report that we saw tonight, there are 13 resignations. So if we went to some middle ground between 25 and 11, so 18,000, that's $234,000 right on this meeting. And we get a personnel report every single meeting. If we went to the low end, that's $143,000. So just the there's not one cost of things, but keeping people alleviates some other costs that we have just been absorbing. The other thing that I wanted to say about the 30-minute duty-free lunch, we've talked a lot about wanting parity with the county, and county employees get 2 paid 15-minute breaks. So that is a way to do something similar for our employees. Thank you again, everyone. Moving on to our next agenda item, strengthening career and technical education for the 21st century, the Perkins Grant application. This is an approval. The administration presented the 2025-2026 Strengthening Career and Technical Education Grant for the 21st century. We saw that on April 7th for a first read. Do I have a motion to approve the 2026-2027 Strengthening Career and Technical Education for the 21st Century Act grant application as presented?
So moved.
Second.
Dr. Guitry and Ms. Franklin, is there any discussion? Ms. Reed, will you please call the roll?
Ms. Bond?
Yes.
Ms. Franklin? Dr. Guitry?
Yes.
Ms. Pardon?
Yes.
Mr. Roberts?
Yes.
Dr. Roundtree?
Yes.
Ms. Purcell?
Yes.
7 in favor.
Motion carries. The next item on our agenda is an approval for the Special Education Annual Plan. The Special Education Department presented the Special Education Annual Plan to the school board. They present the Special Education Annual Plan to the school board for approval. Dr. Julie Ligon, Director of Special Education, presented the MCPS Special Education Annual Plan update on March 17th, 2026. Do I have a motion to approve the Special Education Annual Plan as presented?
So moved.
Second.
Ms. Franklin and Mr. Roberts, any discussion? Ms. Reed, will you please call the roll?
Ms. Bond?
Yes.
Ms. Franklin?
Yes.
Dr. Guitry?
Yes.
Ms. Pardon?
Yes.
Mr. Roberts?
Yes.
Dr. Roundtree?
I think he stepped out.
Ms. Purcell?
Yes.
7 in favor.
Motion carries. The next item on our agenda is an SOQ retention bonus certification. Angie Bland, Director of Finance, will present information on the 2025-2026 state SOQ bonus. This is information only and no action is expected. Thank you, Ms. Bland.
Good evening again, Madam Chair, members of the board, Dr. Gimple. I will now review the details of the current state SOQ bonus. In late March, the governor approved an amendment to the current budget that includes funding for a $1,500 bonus for each SOQ funded position. This initiative is intended to support employee retention across school divisions and other local governments. The state issued a certification document requiring the superintendent's signature to confirm whether the district will accept the funding, identify the fiscal year in which the bonus would be paid, and outline how the funding would be distributed. This certification must be submitted back to the state by May 1st. This type of bonus has been provided by the state in recent years as part of the ongoing efforts to assist school divisions with retaining staff. While the state funds only the bonus for SOQ positions, any extension of that bonus to additional positions must be supported with local funds. This does also require a local match in order to receive the funding. In prior years, this division has used unanticipated year-end funds to recover these additional costs and allow the distribution of the bonus to all employees. Just for reference, if we were to provide the bonus for SOQ positions only, that's less than half of the district's employees. The state anticipates distributing these funds around the June 1st timeframe. As with all revenues, those funds will go first to the county, and this will require an approval from both the school board and then from the Board of Supervisors to allow us to appropriate the funds back into the operating budget in order to pay the employees. Given this timeline, the administration recommends that the board provide a consensus this evening to allow the superintendent to sign the certification confirming the acceptance of the funds, with a plan to issue the $1,500 bonus to all eligible employees on or before August 15th. That will allow us to move the funds into the next fiscal year with both boards' approval and ensure the timely receipt of those funds. It'll allow for the required approval of both boards, and it will provide us an opportunity to come back and share additional details on employee eligibility, hopefully sometime in one of our June board meetings. And I'm happy to answer any questions that you may have regarding this.
Thank you so much, Ms. Bland. Board members?
So, Ms. Bland, I know this has been a normal practice for the state to provide bonuses for the SOQ positions, and not all employees. So do we have any idea about what we're looking like as far as the funding for all employees?
Sure. So last year, the end result was approximately just over 1,400 employees that received the bonus. Last year's bonus was $1,000, so that was a little bit less. We've done some preliminary calculations, and we would need to provide an additional approximately $1 million in order to provide this bonus. The state would be funding approximately $1 million towards that bonus for the SOQ. Now, in order to accept the $1 million, we're required to spend approximately $600,000 with local funds to match in order to provide just the SOQ funding.
Okay, thank you.
Board members, other questions?
Can I ask a question? So are you, if I heard you correctly, it would be an additional 1 million in the next fiscal year for the for the positions that we would be responsible for the non-SOQ?
That's correct, yes.
That's a lot of money.
Yes, sir.
So that's like a quarter of our, what is that? What did they vote for, the 5% increase last night? What's that translate into for our increase? Is it for 4 million? What was it? What is it? Yeah.
Yes, with all new funding, it's about 3.4 million in additional funds to the district, yes.
Right. So just so everyone out there knows that in order to match these funds, a third of the increase from those hotly debated 5 cent increase is going to be going to these benefits, which are deserved. It's not a question of whether they're deserved or not, but just to give people a sense of the implications for the decisions being made at the state and how tight our budget is going to be and how difficult it is to make these decisions. Thank you. So do we need a consensus on whether or not to, I mean, I'm in favor of it. I mean,
Sure. So the biggest piece for us, the next step would be allowing Dr. Gimple to sign that certification and returning it to the state by May 1st. If it's not returned, we're just forfeiting the funding at that point.
okay. And the second is we have to decide which fiscal year, and the recommendation is for the next fiscal year.
Yes. So that certification, the form that he would be signing would be first stating that we accept the funds, and second, asking which fiscal year it would be paid in. It's very common for school districts to pay it in the next fiscal year. Most school districts operate in the same light that we do. There's additional approvals. We have to get it approved here, and then you have to go to your local county government for approvals. We are not alone in this with school districts. The county is going to be having the same discussions on their behalf because they also receive this bonus, but it's only for certain positions there. So they have that same financial burden in order to give this to all employees. But that certification would just require us to determine that district will accept the funding, what fiscal year it will be paid in, and if we are going to distribute it to all employees, or if it would just be those SOQ positions.
Okay, and there's no way to split it?
You certainly could. You could make a decision. You could work through that. The state will make allowances. You could take the total amount and distribute that out to all employees. There is a local match, so regardless, we would have to contribute.
Right.
It's around $650,000, I believe, as a local required effort that we could do that. But we could take those two and put that together. We looked at doing that. I think the total benefit to each employee before tax would be just over $1,000 if we did that.
Okay, is there money to do that? Just so we don't have to take that much up to allocate so much of that additional funding from the county to the local match.
Right. So in the past, we've used unanticipated revenues. So the $600 and some $1,000 should be there, hopefully $1 million or more. You know, we're very fortunate that we do receive additional grant funding throughout the year that you should have those funds. But certainly if it would be the board's will to do that, we could sign the certification and reduce that amount for employees.
So I'm in favor of the bonus if there was a way to do that to free up some funding, because I know we're going to have to make some really tough choices. And so if there was some additional funds so that we could split it over the two, so we don't have to make, because I just don't know how we're going to reconcile this budget based on the allocation from the county.
So
Go ahead.
sorry. So I think two things were discussed there and merged together, maybe, just for clarity. There was a discussion about lowering the bonus across the board to something like $1,000, which would require us to put in $600,000. But then I think there was also something about splitting where the revenue is coming from, whether it's fiscal year 26 and 27. So that was a muddy discussion there.
Yes, in her response, there was an option of reducing it to $1,000. Is that correct?
That is correct.
Yeah, I'm not advocating for that. For me, what I'm primarily advocating is if it's possible for the division to split it over the 2 fiscal years so that we can free up more funding in the budget for next year, I'm for that. That would be my recommendation if it's possible. If it's not possible, if there aren't additional funds, then we should roll it all over into the new fiscal year.
Right. Yeah, I'd be interested in what the plans were for those overages from 26 before we would do that kind of decision too.
Just speaking for our current budget, we wouldn't have an additional $650,000, to take care of it in this current fiscal year. The revenues, yes, would probably be sitting there, the unanticipated revenues, but in our operating budget, we would not. And any revenues that we move into the operating budget in order to pay for that would require the approval of both boards through a supplemental request.
Okay, so for clarification, so this bonus is for SOQs, which we will still have to match $650,000 of it. But is this the retention bonus, or is this just a regular bonus?
It's a retention. It's for the purpose of retention, yes.
Okay. Which I recall from last year, I had a lot of concerns that the way the money was distributed was this group of people get it, this group of people don't get it, or this group gets less than the rest of the employees. Because if you retired, then you don't get a retention bonus. But you worked the whole darn year, so why should you not have gotten that for being with us? I understand the retention thing. And then there were other categories where folks did not get the bonus for some of the sub-positions and part-time workers who we still need to retain, even if they're part-time. So I'm still going to have those same concerns this year.
So do we need a vote in order to accept, or is there a motion that's?
I believe
already
there's
have?
no action expected, but we just kind of do a thumbs up for Dr. Gimple. Is that correct? Ms. Bland, how did we manage the allocation last year? Because this is almost exactly the same as last year, right? So,
Yes, ma'am. So we have unanticipated revenues at the end of the year, and so those were requested as a supplemental appropriation. It was approximately $1 million last year that was moved in for the purpose of the bonus.
and with the regularity that this has kind of been happening, is that something that you factor into budgetary planning?
So this is not part of the state budget. It's a very complicated thing. It's a wonderful thing for employees, but this is the worst timing ever to bring this to school districts or to localities. Again, it's a wonderful thing, and retention is, we've been talking about that all evening, so it's very, very important. So it's difficult to do that. We could certainly put a line item. It's actually a wonderful idea to put that as a line item next year as part of our budget, knowing that this is probably going to come up. I don't think we're going to solve all the problems of the world, especially retention, in the next coming year. So it's a work in progress. So we could certainly put that as a line item. And as you know, the budget process goes for many, many months. So if we do not see the budget amended at that point, we could remove that as a consideration for the budget. That's definitely, that's a great idea to include that. Previous to the SOQ retention bonuses, there were ESSER funded bonuses. So I think we're going to see this for a few years to come before we see it discontinue.
Thank you so much. Board members, any other questions or comments before we give Dr. Gimple a thumbs up or down or abstain, should you choose?
My opinion, since this is going to have a budget impact, we should vote on it, in my opinion.
Okay. Would you like to make a motion to approve accepting one-time bonus funds for state-funded SOQ positions?
For me, I think the motion's going to have to be more than that, because
Okay.
it's not about just accepting the money. I'm not going to accept it if we can't do it for everybody. Once again, it's saying some are more important than the others, and I don't think that's what we stay up here and say all the time, that's, we need everybody to make the district run, everybody. So I think this, each time we get this, to me, it puts an imposition on us as a board. So I like the idea of for me, the 1,500, or not the 1,500, but the money with the $650,000 and split it and do that across the board is the only way I'm going to vote for it.
Can I make a suggestion, any chance? You guys can work that out however you want to spend it, right? However you want to apply it to any number of our employees or any categories or across the board or whatever. If you agree that this is, in concept, it's a good thing to get a bonus for our, for retaining staff. And then, so all we need now is to say, yes, we're going to accept it. You can work out as we get closer to the date that we're going to receive it, exactly how you want it distributed and vote on that. We're not going to do that without your approval of how we're going to distribute it. But you don't necessarily have to do that all tonight. You just need to say, yes, go ahead and sign it. We're going to receive those funds, and then later we'll bring it back up as an item for you guys to vote and discuss, and you can really get into the weeds as far as exactly who you want to receive and how much.
Didn't we just hear that in addition to saying yes or no, which fiscal year we're accepting?
Yes, they need to know which fiscal year we plan to distribute the funds.
So when, sure.
So we need to make those two. So in terms of the distribution within the division, how we're going to allocate it, we can wait on that, but those two questions really have to be answered tonight.
Yes.
Okay.
I move to approve the superintendent to sign for the state bonus dollars and appropriate the funds from fiscal year 2027 funds as suggested here.
Is there a
Looking for a
second?
second.
I'll second that.
Dr. Roundtree and Mr. Roberts, any further discussion?
So I'm going to vote no on that because I would like for us to try to split over the 2 fiscal years. And so I'm going to be more than happy to put that motion forward if this one doesn't pass. If it passes, it passes. But I think that's what you would like to see as well, is to have it split, if possible, over the 2 fiscal years.
She wanted
So it's not all in the new fiscal year.
Just
Was
the
that what you were
600.
saying?
I don't think what I heard Ms. Bland say. I think I heard Ms. Bland say that we had revenue to do the 600,000, and if we put it with the money we would get, then if it were split amongst all the employees, it would be $1,000 apiece opposed to 1,500. That's what I heard, not the fact that it was over 2 years. The fact that we have that on this occurring year that was not a budget item. It was not in that budget, right?
That is correct.
Thank you.
For clarifying question, if we have funds in the 2026 fiscal year that are not going to be expended by the end of the 2026 fiscal year, are we able to move those funds to the 27 fiscal year by some means?
And that's what we do each year. So it generally happens in the July meeting. You'll see multiple letters to the county that we have drafted, and one of those is a supplemental appropriation.
Right.
And so those are all unanticipated revenues. A lot of our grant funding, all of our federal funds, and a lot of state funding, they're not tied to the fiscal year calendar, so it's very difficult. We project the revenues and we get those very close, but some of those expire in September. They go through September. They go through different periods of time, so they don't follow that June to July, time frame. So the funding moves between 2 fiscal years. So we're always going to have those unanticipated revenues at the end of the year. So that's moved forward, and that's a decision that's made, with the help of the board in what we do that for. We've tried to move some of that funding, of course, to the self-insurance fund, and we've been very fortunate to do that every year, but it also does cover bonuses. And then items that we weren't able to fund as part of our budget process and we had to cut, sometimes we were able to move those funds in and we're able to still get those items done.
Yeah. So as we move forward, it can be split by just the fact that you can move it to 2027. It requires board approval and I think Board of Supervisor approval too, correct?
That's correct.
That's fine. I didn't know if we could roll over that entire amount into the new fiscal year. But if you're confident we can roll it all over, then it's fine.
Yeah.
So I have a motion and a second. There's not any other further discussion. Ms. Reed, will you please call the roll?
Ms. Bond?
Voting yes with the discussion, the fact that we are going to move forward with what we discussed about making sure that all employees some way will get it. Yes.
Ms. Franklin?
Yes.
Dr. Guidry?
Yes.
Ms. Pardon?
Yes.
Mr. Roberts?
Yes.
Dr. Roundtree?
Yes.
Ms. Purcell?
Yes.
7 in favor.
Motion carries. Our next agenda item is a supplemental appropriation request that does require action. Dr. Mike Brown, Director of Facilities, will present information on the supplemental appropriations request for facility projects, repairs, and evaluations.
Madam Chair, school board members, Dr. Gempel, and student representative, I'd like to present some information tonight on our supplemental appropriation. The first one is the Auburn Elementary School HVAC upgrade. We're asking for funds for that to purchase the equipment, since there is a significant lead time to that, and also to get us through probably mid-August for funding purposes of that. We'll make another appropriation request in August of 2026 for the remainder of the project funds. Blacksburg High School dugout repairs. We had some issues over the winter started with our baseball dugouts. Noticed, you can see there in the picture, noticed we had some issues there. And then examined the softball dugouts as well and noticed it wasn't as severe as this, but we were still having the same issue. So we asked our architect to come up with a detail and repair. They did that. Also got an estimate for that repair from a contractor, which came in at $15,350. We can do that this summer of 2026. And the Blacksburg sinkhole number 2. Same thing as the first one. We will be doing a ERI test out there to see how significant the sinkhole is. And as you can see, this one is a little bit more significant than the first one. So this will allow us to do the proper planning and how to mitigate that as we move forward. We're hoping to do that remediation in summer of 2026 and the ERI soon. Shawsville Middle School electrical panel evaluation. We brought in electrical engineer Lawrence Perry and Associates to evaluate the current electrical panel and switchgear. That was $1,500 just to get a second opinion on the replacement time of that. Any questions?
Board members, any questions?
I just have a quick one. So Christiansburg High School is going to be completed this summer, correct?
July, yeah, end of July, yes, sir.
Yeah, in July. So if we use that 1.9 million for these repairs, how much does that leave available in that interest-bearing account for the remainder of the project in case something comes up with CHS that?
Let Ms. Bland address that.
Sure.
Yeah.
I'd be happy to do that. So if this is approved this evening, there's just over $1 million remaining in that interest account. But in addition to that, the funds that were approved, the $5 million and some change for the Christiansburg High School project, there's still funding sitting there that's available to get through to the end of July for any other unanticipated items. So they would be able to complete that project with all things taken care of.
And this will this drain the rest of the funds from that interest-bearing account from the bond?
So there would be approximately $1 million, just over $1 million remaining in that interest-bearing fund.
After this?
After
Oh,
this,
okay.
if this is, approved. And in addition, we still have a couple of months, so there's additional funds that will be added to that as well. And there's hopes that Christiansburg High School, if there's nothing else unanticipated there, that there may be a little bit of funding left, to do the rest of the work there, and we may not close out every penny that was anticipated there.
Okay, that's a relief to hear. Thank you.
Board members, other questions? Do I have a motion to authorize a supplemental appropriation to the 2025-2026 school capital improvement budget in the amount of $1,899,150?
So moved.
Second.
Dr. Gitry and Dr. Roundtree. Any further discussion? It does help make the case. Thank you so much, Dr. Brown. Agreed. Miss Reed, will you please call the roll?
Ms. Bond?
Yes.
Ms. Franklin? Yes. Dr. Gitry?
Yes.
Ms. Pardon?
Yes.
Mr. Roberts?
Yes.
Dr. Roundtree?
Yes.
Ms. Purcell?
Yes.
7 in favor.
Motion carries. Okay.
I want to point out too that Dr. Brown was out of town at a conference all day. We did not expect him to come back here for this, but here he shows up and he's all dressed up and does a nice presentation for us. Good job.
Sorry. Our next agenda item are proposed revisions to the Student Code of Conduct, and this is for potential approval. The administration provides a draft of revisions to policy 7-3.1 based upon discussion at recent school board meetings. This policy has had a first and second read recently and can be considered for approval tonight. Based upon multiple changes to the draft, this version presents the current policy language in black text with a compilation of suggested revisions in red. Mr. Garrettson is available for questions. Would you like to ask some questions first, or we can have a motion and discussion?
I make a motion to approve the policy as presented.
Second.
Ms. Franklin and Dr. Roundtree, any discussion? Dr. Gitry?
Yes, thank you. You had a difficult task of reconciling the different suggestions. I did have one question having to do with the subsequent violations under what's called page 21 here. It says the additional language is subsequent violations involving alcohol or other drugs shall result in a disciplinary hearing before the school board. It doesn't say for what. So we should say what that's for. I don't think anybody will argue with that, but is it for potential long-term suspension or expulsion? Is that the purpose of the hearing?
It would be. My understanding from our last meeting was that there was a concern that we talk in the paragraph above about first offenses.
Yeah.
And it does say in the larger paragraph above on page 21, possession or being under the influence of these substances may result in a recommendation for long-term suspension or expulsion. However, and then it authorizes the first offender program. I did understand some discussion last time that board members wanted something additional to go ahead and make the point that we might not be able to exercise that for a second offense.
Yeah. Okay. Great. I know that I asked the question of, because it's not in there, but it's been the practice. I don't know if the board opined and gave a consensus on whether they think it's necessary, because I know that one of the reasons we're doing this revision is to say, empower the administration to make more decisions and to reduce the number of cases. Is it the consensus of the board that a repeat offender, as it were, shall come before the board for a disciplinary hearing? I think that's the question. Then if it is, then I'll offer a friendly amendment to add that the purpose of that disciplinary hearing is for possible long-term suspension or expulsion.
Do you want to amend the motion real quick?
Okay, I'm getting agreement here then. I'm going to offer a friendly motion. I move that we add to the sentence, subsequent violations involving alcohol or other drugs shall result in disciplinary hearing for possible long-term suspension or expulsion before the school board. And if you need to tweak the language, that's fine, but adding that phrase.
Good with that?
I accept as well.
Other board members? Ms. Bond, Ms. Parton, you okay? Mr. Roberts?
I'm good.
Okay. Ms. Reed, will you please call the roll?
Ms. Bond?
Yes.
Ms. Franklin?
Yes.
Dr. Gitry?
Yes.
Ms. Parton?
Yes.
Mr. Roberts?
Yes.
Dr. Roundtree?
Yes.
Ms. Purcell?
Yes.
7 in favor.
Motion carries. Our next agenda item are board policies, update and review. Also for approval, MCPS policies from Section 1 bylaws were presented for board review on April 7th, 2026 as a first read. The policies are brought back tonight for approval.
Move to accept the policies as presented.
Second.
Dr. Roundtree and Mr. Roberts, any discussion? Dr. Gitry?
So I very much appreciate my fellow board member for the work he's doing. So I want to start with that. As a board, we act as a board, and I think for me, I'm trying to wrap my head around this, because if we approve this, then we're saying that the board has reviewed these policies, when really the board hasn't reviewed these policies. A board member has, I guess with staff. In fact, I'm not even clear who's doing what or how they're being reviewed. So for me, for instance, one of the things that I know that we've talked about, and I think that there was a consensus, is for the 1-51 for committees of actually filling that out and delineating school board committees, responsibilities, et cetera. That hasn't happened. So we're now approving the review of a policy that we had a consensus that we were going to update, but we haven't updated it. And so for me, I was like, well, we're approving the review of policies that the board has not actually reviewed as a board. So I appreciate the effort, but I don't know if anybody else feels that way, because I know as a board, we're supposed to act as a body. And so if we're going to review, then the board should be engaged in that review process. That's my feeling. I know it's a ton of labor, and so it's easier to be like, hey, someone's doing all that work for us. Isn't that great? Let's just approve it all. But I think for me, I'd like it to actually be the board reviewing if the board's saying it's reviewing.
So my take on review is each board member would go through and read the policies themselves. And if you've done that, you have in fact reviewed, and collectively, if we've each done that, we have reviewed it.
Well, and I guess to my understanding is basically the work you're doing is just getting policy updated and along with what state policy,
Yeah,
and
well,
making
this
sure they
one-
match.
This one just had really just a typo in it.
Right,
The
right.
rest
But
of
it's,
them is, if we read them, to me, that is, we have reviewed
Right.
them. And if we each are voting yes on it, that means we each have read and reviewed the policy.
So did everybody read all these policies?
I did.
In section 1, I mean, we had this presented to us on April 7th, so we've all had, time.
But
And it was in the agenda, so that was part of being prepared for the meeting.
But it was for the document, not for us to actually review, because I was confused when it was presented to us if we were approving the document, they've all been reviewed, or that we were actually being asked as board members to review all of them and then talk as a board, I guess, about the policies. Like, I was kind of confused on what was actually happening.
We were supposed to review the policies that we were approving the review of.
So from what, I've been used to doing with policies like this, and they're usually in a block, this just happens to be in a section that we're taking, right? Is the staff typically reviews all these policies. We come up with recommendations. In some cases, there's no changes. In some cases, there are. They're presented to you as a block. We're doing that ahead of time so as you can go through them and you can say at this board meeting, I want to pull this policy for further discussion. And you can, just like you would almost like a personnel packet, right? You can pull certain aspects out of there if you want additional discussion and review and to talk about, what's been presented to you. Right now, the staff is presenting to you these policies, and we're saying that there are no revisions other than the red lines that are there. But you are perfectly welcome to pull one and add further discussion, just like you just did with the drug policy there. But if you agree with them as a group, you would just say, you would just pass forward, right? If not, you're welcome to pull one, pull more, pull all of them, and go through each one individually. But and hopefully, if this would happen again earlier in the week, right, through discussion, we post those policies. It's been reviewed by our staff. In this case, it's really been just a few staff, right? Because these are really the very first section of our board policy doc. You guys would have a chance to ask questions, clarification from our staff who's reviewed it, and then by that point, we'd have included any of your suggestions in there, made any type of changes. We get to the board meeting, you could either open it for discussion or approve as it's written.
So I'm going to assume that the list of policies that we, I think, did at our previous meeting and approved, and then this list of policies are basically, from what I can tell, only because I've gone over these a couple times myself, because I've been on the board long enough to go over it a couple times, and they've been discussed, are your basic, some state worded verbiage policies, and just policies that have been, unless there has been something changed by the state, or I'm looking at some of these, there's been some discussion maybe about changes within one of these, that they're basically what the basic policies, that we haven't actually really kind of gotten into any policies that would require major discussion or major overhaul at this point. Am I correct in thinking that?
That's absolutely correct. And it's really, I've said this a few times, I think we are, I don't think we're obligated. We're obligated to go through and review these periodically. It looks like every other year. And by setting it up this way, having a reviewed on date, we've created a record that we have met that obligation that we have to our citizens. So it's just, it seems like the simplest way to do it.
Right. So for me, when we receive a policy for our first reading, like we did with these, then when I'm going through my board packet, I review those policies to see if there's something I feel we need to adjust or change. And if not, whatever has been recommended for us, like with this one, it's only a small little change, and then I'm good with it. So yes, I will say I have reviewed the policy, and I am in agreement with the policy that has been, with the change that's been recommended for us for this.
I'd like to, I would like for us to pull the committee policy and have that filled in. I mean, if we need to have another discussion about that, I'm happy to have that one. One I do have questions about is that we had talked about complaints, and it appears in a couple of sections in this basic policy. So there's the one that I had mentioned, but I know that 152, it says in there that employees are encouraged to communicate their ideas and concerns, you can say complaints, in an orderly and constructive manner to the school board and or the superintendent or superintendent's designee. So are we going to keep that? Because it sounded like you wanted to have that. There was a discussion about where, if complaints need to go to the superintendent. So there are a couple of parts in the policies that I know in that first section that I had questions about, that we started to discuss but didn't. So those are just two examples of where I didn't know how it was appropriate to talk about them.
During the first reading, that's when it would have been, or is most appropriate to raise those points so that any changes can be made before we get the second reading that the board would approve.
The public comments piece that was brought up by Chair Purcell in the last meeting, we did review the policies, and we were looking at Section 2, which will come next, because there is a specific policy, Policy 2-3.5, for public complaints, and we were going to propose, I believe, a regulation to go with that policy, but we aren't there yet. And so that was going to get addressed, but it's going to get addressed in the next section. The first section is for your own bylaws, and that's why you have such a small staff input on this one, because your own bylaws and how you operate for yourselves, we don't have a lot of say-so in that, or opinion on how you want to govern yourselves.
Dr. Guitry, I don't understand what you want with 1-5.1. Can you clarify, please?
So one of the things that we had talked about before was that there had been a presentation multiple years ago because in some divisions in their board policies for committees, they delineate what are superintendent committees, what are board committees, and then if it's a board committee, how are members selected, how often, like the basic parameters for membership, their reporting, do they report to the superintendent, do they, well, if they're a board committee to the board, how do they report to the board? So that was one of the things that we had talked about putting into a policy. I would recommend, because over the years there's been confusion and things, it gets forgotten. So that's, I would like us to formalize that presentation into a policy. That's my recommendation. It would clear up some confusion that there's been over the years.
For your consideration on that front, when you have something that does change from year to year potentially, rather than a policy, you might consider a regulation. Because those are a little bit easier to adapt and change and work with, in particular for things like committees, which may change membership or change in their entirety.
Right. That would be good if it has less to do with the individuals, but just the policy. Like these are board committees, and so I can give examples. I mean, I remember seeing it was quite extensive. It had a very kind of fulsome policy about committees. So because they're regularized, because they're in state code, so, I mean, that's one of the reasons why you're supposed to revise. If it's in state code, it should be reflected in policy. So state code, for instance, for the SEAC, if you have a special ed committee, advisory committee, then there are certain regulations that govern that. And so that's why you would put it in the word policy to reflect state code with those particular committees. Yeah, I appreciate that.
I wonder if this is just, this particular policy is just providing context for committees, but things like SEAC may be mentioned in other areas of your policy manual here, specifically the committees for that. When this is just a regular overview of school board committees and how they're appropriated.
I appreciate that. I mean, I'm happy to share with you a couple of other divisions that have a policy relating to school board policies.
How about, can I just present an idea? Why don't you pull this, let us review this a little further, and if you don't have objections to other policies that we're presenting, go ahead and approve those, and we'll come back, we'll bring this one back after doing a little bit of research. Is that acceptable, Dr. Guitry?
That's fine.
Okay.
I will amend my motion to pull 1-5.1 from what we're approving tonight for further review by the administration. Do we have approval from the second?
Second.
Is there any further discussion? Ms. Reed, will you please call the roll?
Ms. Bond?
Yes.
Ms. Franklin?
Yes.
Dr. Guitry?
Abstain.
Ms. Pardon?
Yes.
Mr. Roberts?
Yes.
Dr. Roundtree?
Yes.
Ms. Purcell?
Yes.
6 in favor, 1 abstained.
Motion carries. Okay. Now we're moving into unfinished business. Are there any items of unfinished business? Hearing none. Are there any items of new business? Dr. Guitry, go ahead.
I feel like I've been doing a lot of talking this evening. Sorry. I know that we have a cell phone policy. It was brought to my attention that of a concern that it doesn't extend to other personal devices that are connected to the internet. So about there's students who are bringing iPads and their own devices, and they can message, and as long as they're connected to the internet, they can still engage in some of those activities that we're trying to limit. So there was a suggestion of extending beyond just cell phones, but also just personal devices connected to the internet and limiting their usage from bell to bell. I don't know if anybody else on the board has heard this, but it was a recommendation of extending, because if you bring an iPad with you to school, what's to prevent you from using that as you would have used your phone for messaging, using websites and whatnot? And so this was a recommendation from a teacher, and I think it warranted having a discussion as a board.
Yeah, we can pull that policy and look at it. I know for a fact that like smartwatches and whatnot are included. I thought all personal electronic devices connected to the internet were included, but we can definitely, I would definitely be okay with reviewing that, because that would be my intent, that all personal electronic devices connected to the internet would be included in that policy.
Can I chime in? So, what a lot of my peers do is if you bring like a MacBook or like an iPad, you can easily just text during class. And I only have one teacher, since the policy has been implemented, that will not allow like it has to be your school issued Chromebook the entirety of class. But all my other like classes, everyone has iPads, and yes, the smartwatches technically still count, but people just bring their iPads and MacBooks and not use their school-issued Chromebooks. You're still able to do whatever you want during class, and teachers cannot see what you're doing on your screen nor block it.
Yeah, we should close that loophole if that's.
And I've kind of been saying that, so I appreciate you saying that. I've brought that to this board's attention quite a few times, and thank you for saying it.
So your policy says cell phones and other connected devices. Then in parentheses, it talks about, watches, et cetera, but doesn't mention specifically, other types of computers, but other connected devices seems like it would cover,
That definitely seems like somebody's circumventing the intent of the law here.
Yes, sir. Rob, anything we could do about that?
Should have brought my computer with me actually, because there is a law that the Senate and House did adopt here recently that kind of changed some of that wording to include smart devices. They also outlined more what the bell-to-bell means. So I'm sure that will be something that we'll be bringing to you once we kind of get more wording on that. So we do offer guest network in our schools, mainly for our staff, for their personal devices, their phones. There are some schools that they do not have cell service, because Eastmont's one of them, because of the cell service. We do provide that access for staff. We can look at what does that look like, because we also have to think about substitutes coming in as well. And providing them access. So there's some things we can look at for our network, whether that be that the staff and substitutes have a login for that guest network, and then students would not be able to access that. The issue is, do we open it up to the public after hours as well? So those are just all things that we need to discuss.
But that really doesn't tackle the problem, because if they use a personal device as a hotspot that they connect it
Correct.
to, or they have Wi-Fi connection through, if they have data on the device, then you don't need to use MCPS network in order to connect to the internet.
Correct.
Right.
So at that point, I mean, if it's in policy, they shouldn't have it, then that becomes a conversation with the staff and then the principal as well.
Yeah, so I think part of it is the misnomer. We've called it the cell phone policy, but we really should use different language, and it should be. We need to reiterate that to the building.
And not to add more to this discussion, but also smart glasses are becoming a thing. And so if a student comes in with that and that's their only prescription, what does that mean?
You do
So-
have it covered in your policy. It says, for the purpose of this document, this is the cell phone policy. The term cell phone will encompass all connected devices, including any personal electronic device that could connect to the internet and wirelessly collect, process, and transmit data, including any smartwatches and tablets.
Okay, so then it's not a policy problem, but administration side of
For
implementation.
monitoring and, yes, sir.
Yeah, so I would encourage the administration to not call it the cell phone policy exclusively, to make sure that it's,
Just reiterate what our policy is.
Yeah.
For sure, yes.
And I feel like that, like I mentioned, that policy will probably be coming back up because there were some changes in what they describe as bell to bell. So.
okay, thank you, everyone.
Thank you, Mr. Radcliffe, for stepping in. Was I on new business? Any other items of new business? I think this is more appropriate for new business than unfinished, but on April 17th, Ms. Osborne shared with us a spreadsheet of every policy by section, when they were adopted, when they were last revised. Given some of the conversation, the ongoing conversation about policies and review and process, I think it might make sense for the division to provide a calendar, maybe put something on the website as well. I guess we might need to approve the calendar first and then put it on the website so that the community knows we're going to look at this section at this date. Certain sections need lots of input and will be slower. If we don't need this to take 15 years to review all of these, but many are out of date and in need of review. So I realize that might be a bit of a bear to put together, but I think it makes sense since we are engaging in this process, and I know that the community likes to have input, especially on certain policy areas.
Absolutely. And I think, we really wanted to get kind of rolling in the right direction here, and I really appreciate Mr. Roberts coming in and sort of jump-starting this, along with Ms. Bressler has been awesome, and so we've got a couple minds working on this, and now as we get into more of the meat and potatoes of our policies, we'll certainly do that. There'll be certainly opportunity for posting these online way ahead of time, as we begin to review them as a division. I think we're looking forward to doing that as well, and sort of collectively attacking this, and again, we're behind in many of those policies, so it's going to be more than just like two folks looking at it. But this first section was just pertaining to you guys and how your governance, and that's why it was done the way it was done. But going forward, it'll be a much more comprehensive review, along with posting it for public input.
Thank you so much. Any other items of new business? Any announcements?
I'd just like to thank everyone who put on Andrew's baby shower today. It was very nice, and I appreciate being able to come. I don't get to come to very many things, so congratulations to baby Webb when he gets here.
Thank you, Ms. Bond.
Yeah, so we've received notification from VSBA that at our Blue Ridge Regional meeting, there's an art contest from across the state, and we had Brooke Underwood from Falling Branch Elementary School win first place. So we have typically, because those are framed very nicely and put on display at the headquarters there, and I think sometimes they even go to the Capitol, and then a year later, we get them back. So I hope we remember in a year, it has been customary that we bring those students with their artwork and honor them. So it's just very happy for Brooks.
Yeah, thank you so much for mentioning that, Ms. Franklin, in order to participate in that art contest, someone from the division has to attend the meeting. So I was able to do that last week and brought art from a student at Auburn High School and Falling Branch Elementary, and was extremely exciting for Brooks to be able to win and be honored in that way. He could win a statewide competition after winning the regional award. The next regional meeting will be in Roanoke County, so a little easier to attend than Patrick County, because that was a bit of a haul. But I do appreciate Amy Walker and Amanda Winter for putting on a really wonderful event. It was great to be able to talk with colleagues and just celebrate public education. Any other announcements? Okay, so upcoming school board meetings, this is kind of important. Our next meeting we had a special budget hearing scheduled for April 28th, but given that the General Assembly does not convene until April 23rd, that is probably premature, and we should postpone that to likely the other special budget session that we had planned for May 12th. However, I think there are some closed session items that we'll need to discuss on the 28th, so if board members could keep their agendas free for that. We all would appreciate that greatly. Our next regular meeting will be on May 5th. Oh. We have some closed session items that we need to address.
Yeah, and the board members, I think I spoke with every single one of you, about this agenda that we just went through. Just appreciate all of your input and collaboration on that. And, I think the presentations went as well as they did because, of your involvement there and suggestions and improvements. And so I appreciate your time. I know it's additional time outside of this meeting and the many other meetings that you're required to come to. But I just appreciate your collaboration and your cooperation on those things. Thank you.
Okay. I adjourn this meeting at 9:57 p.m. Thank you, everyone.